My own son looked at me like I was a stray dog that had wandered onto his porch, and the only thing he was worried about was his expensive Italian rug. I stood there shivering in the snow with $60 million sitting in a bank account he knew nothing about, but all he saw was an old man in a dirty coat. 2 days later, my lawyer walked into his office and placed a check on his desk that made his knees buckle, but by then, it was too late. I had already found out who my real family was, and it was the son I had neglected for years, the one who sold his wedding ring just to buy me a warm meal. If you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, then hit that like button and subscribe because this story is for you. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from, and if you believe that money reveals a person's true character. The wind in Chicago does not just blow, it cuts right through you like a serrated knife, especially in February. I was standing on the doorstep of a $3 million mansion in the upscale suburb of Highland Park. The house was a fortress of brick and stone with golden light spilling out of the massive bay windows. Inside, I could see the silhouette of a 12-foot Christmas tree even though it was already February. My son Darnell always liked to show off. I looked down at my hands. I had rubbed dirt into my fingernails and stopped taking my blood pressure medication for 2 days so my hands would shake naturally. I was wearing an army surplus jacket I had bought at a thrift store for $5. It smelled like mothballs and stale tobacco. It was the perfect costume for the death of a tycoon. I raised my hand and knocked on the solid oak door. My knuckles were raw from the cold. I waited. Inside, I could hear the faint sound of jazz music and the clinking of crystal glasses. It was a Tuesday night, but Darnell lived like every night was a gala. The door swung open. Warm air rushed out, hitting my frozen face like a physical blow, carrying the scent of roasted lamb and expensive cologne. Darnell stood there. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car. He held a glass of red wine in one hand. When he saw me, his smile didn't just fade, it evaporated. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask why I was standing in a blizzard. He just used his foot to block the door from opening any wider. "Dad," he said. The word sounded foreign in his mouth, like he was trying to remember what it meant. "What are you doing here? You look like hell." I let my shoulders slump. I made my voice crack. It wasn't hard. The cold was real even if the poverty wasn't. I lost it all, Darnell. I looked him in the eye. The company, the house, everything. The government seized the accounts this morning. I don't have anywhere to go, son. I watched his eyes. I was looking for concern. I was looking for fear for his father's safety. Instead, I saw a calculator running behind his pupils. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his inheritance burning to ash. "What do you mean you lost it all?" he hissed, glancing back over his shoulder to make sure his wife wasn't listening. "What about the trust fund? What about the vacation home in Boca?" "Gone," I whispered. I took a step forward, trying to get out of the biting wind. "Can I come in? I just need a place to sleep for a few days until I figure this out. I haven't eaten since yesterday." Darnell didn't move his foot. He actually pressed it harder against the doorframe. "I built this boy's first Pinewood Derby car. I paid for his Ivy League education. I covered up his drunk driving incident when he was 22. And now he was looking at me like I was a bacteria he didn't want to touch." Before he could answer, I heard the click of heels on the marble floor. Tiffany appeared behind him. My daughter-in-law was a beautiful woman with a heart made of absolute granite. She was holding a plate of hors d'oeuvres. She took one look at me and wrinkled her nose so hard I thought her Botox might crack. "Oh my God, Darnell," she said, her voice high and shrill. "Please tell me that is not your father. He smells like a wet dog. He says he's broke." "Tiffany," Darnell said without turning around. "He says the company is gone." Tiffany dropped the smile instantly. She stepped closer, peering at me through the crack in the door, but staying far enough back so that my poverty wouldn't infect her. "Broke," she repeated. "Like actually broke, or just rich people broke where you only have 1 million left?" "Bankrupt," I said, adding a tremor to my voice. "Zero. I need a room, Tiffany. Just the guest room above the garage. I won't be a bother." She laughed. It was a short, sharp sound like glass breaking. "The guest room," she said, shaking her head as if I had asked for the moon. "Darnell, we have the charity gala committee coming over tomorrow morning. We can't have him here. Look at him. He looks like he has lice. Imagine what the neighbors would say if they saw a hobo walking up our driveway." "Tiffany, please," I pleaded, reaching out a hand. My fingers brushed Darnell's cashmere sleeve and he flinched as if I had burned him. He brushed the spot where I had touched him with a look of pure disgust. "Don't touch the sweater," Dad Darnell snapped. "This is dry clean only. Look, we can't do this right now. It is not a good time." "Not a good time," I repeated. "It is 10 degrees below zero, Darnell. I am 73 years old." Darnell sighed the heavy sigh of a man burdened by an inconvenience he felt he didn't deserve. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I will call you an Uber," he said, tapping on the screen. "There is a Motel 6 out on the highway near the airport. It is cheap. I will pay for 2 nights. After that, you are going to have to figure this out. You are a businessman, right? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Isn't that what you always told me?" He was using my own life lessons against me, but he had twisted them. I told him that to teach him resilience, not to teach him to abandon his family in a snowstorm. "I don't need a motel, Darnell," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I need my family." "We are not a homeless shelter," Augustus Tiffany cut in. Her voice was cold enough to freeze the wine in Darnell's glass. "And honestly, this is really irresponsible of you. How do you lose a logistics empire overnight? It sounds like you made some bad choices. We shouldn't have to pay for your mistakes." She put a hand on Darnell's shoulder. "Close the door, honey. You are letting all the heat out, and the smell is getting into the foyer." Darnell looked at me one last time. For a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of hesitation. A memory of the time I taught him to ride a bike, or the time I sat by his hospital bed when he had appendicitis. But then he looked at his wife, and he looked at his perfect warm house, and the flicker died. "Sorry, Dad," he said. "The Uber will be here in 5 minutes. Wait by the curb. The driver won't come up the driveway if there is ice." He stepped back. The heavy oak door swung shut. I heard the distinct heavy click of the deadbolt sliding into place. Then I heard a second lock, and a third. I stood there in the darkness. The porch light clicked off, leaving me in the shadows. The wind howled around the corner of the house, stinging my eyes. I looked down at my shaking hands, but they weren't shaking from the cold anymore. They were shaking from a rage so hot it could have melted the snow around my boots. I didn't wait for the Uber. I wasn't going to a motel. I reached into my pocket and touched the small voice recorder I had kept running the entire time. I felt the cold plastic against my thumb. I had my answer. I knew exactly how much my life was worth to Darnell Payne. It was worth exactly 2 nights at a Motel 6. I turned my back on the mansion. I started walking down the long, icy driveway toward the main road. The snow was falling harder now, covering my tracks as soon as I made them. I had one more stop to make tonight. One more sun to test. I hoped to God Jamal would be different, because if he wasn't, I was going to die a very lonely old man. But as I trudged through the sludge on the side of the highway with the headlights of passing cars blinding me, I made a silent promise to the ghost of my wife, Beatrice. I promised her I would clean house, and Darnell had just volunteered to be the first piece of trash I threw out. But first I had to survive the night. And the only place left to go was the one place I had avoided for 10 years. The rundown garage in the south side where my youngest son scraped together a living fixing cars that were destined for the scrapyard. I pulled my collar up and walked into the dark. The south side of Chicago smells different than the north side. It does not smell like manicured lawns or expensive perfume. It smells of diesel fumes and fried onions and hard work that never seems to pay off. The wind here whistles through the cracks of boarded-up windows instead of gliding over marble facades. By the time I reached the corner of 47th and King Drive, my legs felt like lead pipes. I had walked the last mile because the bus stopped running. My expensive Italian leather boots were soaked through with gray slush. I stood across the street looking at the building. It was a small brick structure that had seen better days probably back in the 60s. A faded sign hung crookedly above the bay door reading J's Auto Repair. The J was missing its bottom hook. A single light bulb flickered inside, casting long dancing shadows against the oil-stained concrete. I could hear music thumping softly. Not the classical jazz Darnell played to impress his friends, but old-school hip-hop with a beat that sounded like a heartbeat. It was the music of struggle and survival. I crossed the street. Every step sent a jolt of pain up my spine. I was 73 years old, and I had just been thrown away by 2 sons who had everything. Now I was coming to the son who had nothing. The son I had stopped visiting 5 years ago because his garage was too dirty and his neighborhood made me nervous. The guilt hit me harder than the cold wind. I reached the side door. It was unlocked. I pushed it open. The smell hit me first. Motor oil, old rubber, and underneath it all the faint scent of lavender cleaning spray trying to mask the grime. Inside, a pair of legs was sticking out from under a rusted-out sedan. I recognized those work boots. I bought them for him 3 Christmases ago. They were worn down to the soles, now held together with duct tape. "Jamal," I croaked. My voice was barely a whisper. The music stopped instantly. The mechanic board slid out from under the car. Jamal sat up, wiping grease from his forehead with the back of a dirty glove. He looked older than I remembered. There were gray hairs in his beard and deep lines of exhaustion around his eyes. But when he saw me standing there shivering and dripping wet, his eyes didn't narrow with suspicion. They went wide with fear. "Pops," he breathed. He didn't ask why I was there. He didn't ask about the time. He scrambled to his feet, knocking over a wrench in his haste. "Pops, what happened? You are freezing." I tried to answer. I tried to say I was bankrupt. I tried to say I was sorry, but my body gave up. My knees buckled. The room spun. The last thing I saw was the concrete floor rushing up to meet my face. But I never hit the ground. Strong arms caught me. Arms that were stained with grease and smelled of labor. "I got you. I got you, Pops." Jamal was yelling. "Keisha! Keisha, get the blankets. Dad is here." I drifted in and out of consciousness for a few minutes. When I fully opened my eyes, I was sitting on a lumpy sofa in the small apartment above the garage. It was warm. Someone had wrapped a thick wool blanket around my shoulders. A space heater was buzzing furiously at my feet. I looked around. The apartment was tiny. You could fit this entire living space into Darnell's master bathroom. The paint was peeling in the corners and the furniture was mismatched thrift store finds. But it was clean, immaculately clean. "Here, drink this." It was Keisha, my daughter-in-law. She was 7 months pregnant, her belly pressing against her oversized t-shirt. She was holding a mug of hot tea. Her hands were rough from work. She was a nurse at the county hospital, but her touch was gentle. "Thank you," I whispered, taking the mug. My hands were shaking so bad she had to help me hold it. Jamal was pacing the room, still in his greasy coveralls. He looked terrified. "Dad, tell us what happened," he said. "Did you get hurt? Were you mugged? Why didn't you call?" "I would have come to get you. I would have driven anywhere." I took a sip of the tea. It was cheap tea bags, but it tasted like nectar. "I lost it all." "Jamal," I lied. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I had to finish the test. The company went under. The IRS took the house. Darnell and Marcus, they couldn't help me. "I have nowhere else to go, son. I am sorry to just show up like this." Jamal stopped pacing. He looked at Keisha. I held my breath. This was the moment. This was where they would calculate the cost of feeding an old man. This was where they would tell me they didn't have room. Keisha didn't even blink. She looked at Jamal and nodded a small, firm nod. "You are not going anywhere, Pops," Jamal said, dropping to his knees beside the sofa. "You are home." "But I am broke, Jamal," I pressed. "I don't have a cent. I can't pay for food. I can't pay rent." "Stop it," Jamal said firmly. "You are my father. You raised me. You don't pay to live in your son's house." "But where will I sleep?" I asked, looking around the one-room apartment. There was only one bed in the corner, separated by a hanging sheet. "You will take the bed," Keisha said, smiling. Her smile was tired but genuine. "It is the best spot near the radiator. It is good for your joints." "No," I protested, trying to stand up. "You are pregnant, Keisha. I can't take your bed. The sofa is fine. The sofa has a broken spring right in the middle," Jamal said, gently pushing me back down. "And Keisha tosses and turns anyway. We actually like the sofa better, right, baby?" Right, Keisha lied. She lied so easily to protect my dignity. "We will take the sofa. You take the bed, Dad. You need the rest." Tears pricked my eyes. Real tears this time. Darnell wouldn't give me a guest room that was sitting empty. Jamal was giving me his own bed while his pregnant wife slept on a broken couch. "I smell dinner burning," Keisha said, clapping her hands to break the emotional tension. "Who is hungry?" They helped me to the small round table in the kitchen area. Dinner was a box of macaroni and cheese, the kind that costs 99 cents at the bodega. There were no truffles, no aged steaks, just bright orange pasta and 3 slices of white bread on a plate. And in the middle of the table on a chipped saucer sat 2 sausages. Just 2. I watched silently. Keisha served the mac and cheese. She gave me the biggest portion, scraping the pot clean. Then Jamal picked up the fork to serve the sausages. He put one on Keisha's plate. "You need the protein for the baby," he said softly. Then he picked up the second sausage. He looked at it. I knew he had been working under cars for 10 hours. I knew he was starving. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, just a fraction. Then he placed the sausage on my plate. "Eat up, Pops," he said, smiling. "You need your strength." "What about you?" I asked, staring at the lonely sausage on my pile of pasta. "I ate at the shop," Jamal lied. "I grabbed a sandwich earlier. I am stuffed." I knew he was lying. His stomach growled loudly, betraying him instantly. He just laughed it off, rubbing his belly. "That is just digestion," he joked. "Go on, Dad. Eat while it is hot." I cut into the sausage. It was greasy and salty and processed. But as I chewed it, I realized something profound. This was the most expensive meal I had ever eaten. Darnell's lamb chops cost $50, but they cost him nothing in effort. This 50-cent sausage cost Jamal his own hunger. It was a sacrifice. We ate in silence. The wind howled outside, rattling the thin window panes, but inside it felt warm. We talked about small things, the baby coming, the weather. They didn't ask about the bankruptcy. They didn't pry into my failure. They just offered me a sanctuary. After dinner, Keisha insisted on washing the dishes while Jamal set up the bed for me. They gave me their best pillows. They gave me the quilt Keisha's grandmother had made. "Go to sleep, Dad," Jamal said, tucking the blanket around me like I was the child and he was the parent. "We are right here if you need anything." I turned my face to the wall, pretending to fall asleep instantly. I slowed my breathing, making it heavy and rhythmic, but my ears were wide open. I heard the lights click off. I heard the rustle of the sofa cushions as they tried to get comfortable. I heard Keisha sigh softly. "Jamal," she whispered. Her voice was thin with worry. "We only have enough milk for tomorrow morning. And the electricity bill came today. It is a shut-off notice." I clenched my fists under the blanket. A shut-off notice. And they had just fed me their dinner. "I know," baby Jamal whispered back. "I know. How are we going to feed him?" Jamal, Keisha asked. "I'm not saying he can't stay. I love your dad. But we are barely making it, with the baby coming and now another mouth to feed." "We will figure it out," Jamal said. His voice was steady, rock solid. "How?" Keisha asked. "Keisha." "I will take the graveyard shift at the warehouse," Jamal said. "Jamal, no," Keisha hissed. "You are already working 60 hours at the shop. You will kill yourself. You can't work all day and all night." "I have to," Jamal said. "He is my dad, Keisha. He looks so broken tonight. Did you see his hands? He was shaking." Darnell and Marcus turned their backs on him. "I can feel it. I am the only one he has left." "But your back," Keisha argued gently. "The doctor said you need rest." "My back can wait," Jamal said. "My dad can't. He carried me when I was a kid. He put food on the table even when times were tough. Now it is my turn. I will call the warehouse in the morning. Don't worry about the money, baby. I will make it happen. Just sleep." I heard him kiss her. Then silence settled over the room. I lay there in the dark, staring at the peeling paint on the wall. Tears streamed down my face, soaking the pillowcase. I had spent my life building a logistics empire, moving millions of tons of cargo across the world. I thought I was a strong man. But lying there in that squeaky bed, listening to my son offer to break his own back to feed me, I realized I was the weakest man in the room. I had judged Jamal for years. I thought he was unambitious because he didn't want to wear a suit. I thought he was a failure because he fixed cars instead of running a corporation. I was a fool. He was the most successful pain of us all. He had a heart that was worth more than my entire stock portfolio. I wiped my eyes on the rough wool blanket. I made a vow right there in the dark. Jamal thought he was going to take the graveyard shift to save me. He had no idea that I was about to work the biggest shift of my life to save him. Tomorrow I would find out just how far he would go. I would test him one last time, not because I doubted him, but because I wanted to be absolutely certain that he was the only one worthy of the empire I was about to hand over. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I spent the night planning. And for the first time in years, I wasn't planning for profit. I was planning for justice. The next morning would be the beginning of the end for Darnell and Marcus. But for Jamal, it would be the beginning of a new life. He just had to pass one more test, a test that would cost him the only thing of value he had left. I woke up the next morning with a plan that made my stomach churn. It was a cruel plan. Maybe the cruelest thing a father could do to a son who had just given him his own bed. But I had to be sure. When you are about to hand over a $60 million empire, you do not make decisions based on warm, fuzzy feelings. You make them based on cold, hard facts. I needed to know if Jamal's kindness had a limit. I needed to know if there was a dollar amount where his love for me would stop. I sat at the small kitchen table wrapped in the wool blanket. When Jamal came in from the garage wiping his hands on a rag, I started my performance. I let my hand shake violently as I reached for my water glass. I spilled half of it on the table. I gasped for air, clutching my chest. Pops Jamal was at my side in a second, dropping the rag. "Pops, are you okay? Is it your heart?" "I am fine, son," I lied, forcing a wheezing cough. I missed my dose. The medicine ran out 2 days ago." "What medicine?" Jamal asked, his eyes wide with panic. "What do you need? I will run to the pharmacy right now." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was a fake prescription I had printed out myself before I left the mansion. It was for a drug called cardioxin. It didn't exist. It was just a fancy name for high-strength vitamin B12, but the price tag I had written next to it was very real. "It is a special compound, Jamal," I whispered, pushing the paper toward him. "Insurance doesn't cover it anymore since the company went under." "It is expensive, son. Too expensive. Just let it go. I have had a good life." Jamal snatched the paper. I saw his eyes scan the name of the drug and then drop to the price. $2,000 per week. I saw the blood drain from his face. $2,000 was probably what he made in a month of fixing transmissions and changing oil. He stared at the paper and I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was doing the math. Rent, electricity, food for the baby, and now this. I expected him to hand the paper back. I expected him to say, "Pops, I can't do it." I would have understood. It was an impossible ask. Instead, Jamal folded the paper carefully and put it in his pocket. "Don't talk like that, Pops," he said, his voice trying to sound brave. "You are not going anywhere. I will get it." "How, Jamal?" I challenged him. I pushed him. I wanted to see him break. "You don't have $2,000 lying around. I said I will get it," Jamal snapped. It was the first time he had ever raised his voice at me. He looked shocked by his own tone. "I am sorry, Dad. Just give me an hour. Rest, please." He walked out of the apartment and down the stairs to the garage office. I waited 10 seconds. Then I threw off the blanket and followed him. I moved silently down the stairs, my socks making no noise on the worn wood. I stood just outside the office door. The glass was thin. I could hear everything. I heard him dialing. I knew exactly who he was calling. He was calling the only people who could write a check for $2,000 without blinking. "Pick up Darnell. Pick up," Jamal whispered. Then I heard Darnell's voice booming through the speakerphone. Jamal must have put it on speaker so he could pace while he talked. "What do you want, Jamal?" "I am in a meeting with the architects. We are redesigning the kitchen." "It is Dad," Jamal said. His voice was trembling. "He is sick, Darnell. Really sick. He needs this medicine. It is $2,000 a week. If he doesn't get it, his heart is going to give out." There was a silence on the line, then a short, sharp laugh. $2,000 a week, Darnell repeated. "That is insane. Look, Jamal, the old man had a good run. He is 73. He is our father." Jamal shouted. "He is not a used car. He is a money pit," Darnell shot back. "Look, I spoke to Marcus. We agree on this. Dad made his bed with his bad business deals. Now he has to lie in it. We are not throwing good money after bad. If he is that sick, maybe it is a blessing. It is a release, Jamal. Let him go." I stood in the shadows outside the door and felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the winter draft. Let him go. My eldest son was talking about me like I was a horse with a broken leg. "But he will die," Jamal pleaded. "Then let him die," Darnell said. "Stop calling me Jamal." "You are stressing Tiffany out." Then I heard Tiffany's voice in the background, shrill and annoyed. "Tell him to apply for Medicaid, Darnell, or take him to the free clinic. That is what taxes are for. I am not skipping my Aspen trip to pay for pills for an old man who smells like a dumpster." The line went dead. Darnell had hung up. I heard a sound from inside the office. It was a sound I hadn't heard since Jamal was 6 years old and fell off his bike. It was the sound of my son crying, a low, guttural sob of pure frustration and helplessness. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. I wanted to burst in there. I wanted to hug him and tell him that I had $60 million and he would never have to worry about money again. I wanted to tell him that Darnell was out of the will and that justice was coming. But I couldn't. Not yet. The test wasn't over. I needed to see what Jamal would do when the world said no. I heard him stand up. I heard the heavy metal drawer of his tool chest slide open. Snap-on tools are the gold standard for mechanics. They are not just wrenches and ratchets. They are an investment. A master set can cost as much as a luxury car. I knew Jamal had spent 15 years building his collection. Every time he made a little extra money, he bought a new piece. Those tools were his livelihood. They were his pride. They were the only reason he could compete with the big dealerships. I peeked through the crack in the door. Jamal was standing in front of the massive red tool chest. He was running his hand over the chrome wrenches gleaming under the fluorescent light. He picked up a torque wrench. I remember when he bought that. He ate ramen noodles for a month to afford it. He held it for a long time, staring at it like he was saying goodbye to an old friend. Then he wiped his eyes with his sleeve and started throwing the tools into a canvas bag. One by one, clang after clang. It sounded like a funeral bell. He was emptying his future into a bag to buy me a few more days of life. I hurried back upstairs before he could catch me. I got back into bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. My heart was racing, but this time it was from pride. Jamal left a few minutes later. I watched from the window as he loaded the heavy canvas bags into his truck. He drove off toward the pawnshop district. I lay there for hours staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the business deals I had made in my life. I thought about the ruthlessness it took to build my company. I had always thought that strength was about acquiring things, about holding on. But Jamal was showing me that real strength was about letting go. He was willing to strip himself bare to protect me. He returned 3 hours later. I heard the truck pull in. I heard him come up the stairs. His steps were heavy. He walked into the apartment. He was holding a small brown pharmacy bag. He looked exhausted. His eyes were red-rimmed, but he forced a smile when he saw me looking at him. "Here you go, Pops," he said, placing the bottle on the nightstand. I picked up the bottle. It was just vitamins, but he had transferred them into a prescription bottle to fool me. "Jamal," I asked softly, "where did you get the money?" He looked away. He couldn't look me in the eye. "I got lucky," he said. He laughed a dry, hollow laugh. "You won't believe it, Dad. I bought a scratch-off ticket at the gas station, just on a whim. Bam! $2,000. Can you believe that? The Lord works in mysterious ways." "Right." I looked at his hands. They were empty. The grease-stained fingers that usually played with a wrench to calm his nerves were now fidgeting with nothing. "A scratch-off ticket," I repeated. "That is amazing, son." "Yeah," Jamal said, turning away to hide the pain in his face. "Just lucky. Take your pill, Dad. I have to go back down to the shop. I have a lot of work to do." He didn't have work to do. He couldn't work. He had just sold the tools he needed to do the work. He was going down there to stare at an empty red metal box. I watched him go. As the door closed behind him, I uncapped the bottle. I took out one of the vitamins. I swallowed it dry. It tasted bitter. I reached for my phone under the pillow. I sent a text message to Sterling, my lawyer. It was short. "Go to the pawn shop on 5th. Buy everything, every single wrench, pay double if you have to, and keep it safe." I put the phone down. Jamal had passed the test. He had passed with flying colors. But there was one more thing that needed to happen. Darnell and Tiffany thought they had won. They thought they had successfully discarded me. They were probably laughing about it right now over their expensive brunch. They had no idea that I was done playing the victim. I got out of bed. I felt stronger than I had in years. The vitamin B12 hadn't kicked in yet, but the rage had. It was time to introduce Tiffany to the consequences of her actions. I put on my dirty coat. I put on my worn-out boots. "Where are you going?" Dad Keisha asked, coming out of the bathroom. She looked worried. "I need a walk, honey," I said. "Just a walk to clear my head. The medicine is making me feel better already." I walked out of the garage. The wind was still cold, but I didn't feel it. I had a fire burning inside me. I was going to find Tiffany, and I was going to give her a tip she would never forget. The endgame had begun. The Gold Coast district of Chicago is a different world. It is a world of marble sidewalks and windows that display handbags costing more than a teacher makes in a year. I walked down Oak Street, pulling my collar up against the biting wind. I was not there to shop. I was there to meet a private investigator named Vance in the back of a coffee shop. Vance was a man who could find a needle in a haystack, and I had paid him to find every skeleton in Darnell and Tiffany's closet. I wanted to know where every cent of my money had gone in the last 10 years. I was walking with my head down, trying to blend into the shadows of the high-rise buildings. I was still wearing my disguise. The army jacket was stained with grease from Jamal's garage, and my boots left muddy prints on the pristine pavement. People gave me a wide berth. Ladies in fur coats clutched their purses tighter when they saw me. Men in $1,000 suits pretended I didn't exist, staring right through me, as if I were made of glass. It was a strange kind of invisibility. I was right there, but I was beneath their notice. I turned the corner near the Prada store, and that is when I saw it, the white Range Rover. I knew that car intimately. I had signed the check for it 2 years ago as a birthday gift for my daughter-in-law. It was parked illegally in the loading zone, its hazard lights blinking. I tried to turn away. I tried to duck into the alleyway before she saw me, but I wasn't fast enough. The door of the boutique opened and Tiffany stepped out. She was not alone. She was flanked by 2 of her friends' women I recognized from the country club. They were laughing, holding shopping bags that screamed excessive wealth. Tiffany looked radiant in a cream-colored coat that probably cost $5,000. She looked like the picture of success. Then she looked up and her eyes locked onto mine. The laughter died in her throat. For a moment, time seemed to freeze on that busy street. I saw the color drain from her face. She didn't look at me with recognition or love. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated horror, not because she was worried about my well-being, but because she was terrified that her friends would realize that the dirty old man standing 10 feet away was her father-in-law. She said something quickly to her friends, pointing at the store window. They turned to look at a display of shoes. Tiffany seized the moment. She didn't walk toward me, she marched. Her heels clicked aggressively on the pavement like gunshots. She closed the distance between us, stopping just out of arm's reach as if she were afraid my poverty might be contagious. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. Her voice was a venomous whisper. "I am walking, Tiffany," I said calmly. "It is a public street." "You are not walking," she spat. "You are loitering. Look at you. You look like a monster. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? I have the president of the junior league inside that store. If she sees me talking to a vagrant, my reputation is ruined." I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the heavy makeup trying to hide the lines of stress around her mouth. I saw the desperation in her eyes. She was a woman who had built her entire identity on the foundation of my money, and now that she thought the foundation was gone, she was cracking. "I am hungry, Tiffany," I said, testing her one last time. "I haven't eaten a hot meal since I left your house. Can you spare $5? I wanted to see if there was a shred of humanity left in her. I wanted to see if the woman who had sat at my Thanksgiving table for 10 years could find it in her heart to buy an old man a sandwich. Tiffany looked back at her friends who were starting to turn around. Panic flared in her eyes. She fumbled with her purse. It was a Birkin bag worth more than Jamal's entire garage. Her manicured fingers clawed inside. She didn't hand me the money. She didn't place it in my palm with dignity. She pulled out a crisp $100 bill and she threw it. She threw it on the ground. The bill fluttered in the wind for a second before landing in a puddle of gray slush near my boot. "Take it," she snarled. "Take it and get the hell out of here. Go back to whatever gutter you crawled out of. You are polluting the air here, Augustus. You smell like failure." I looked down at the money. Benjamin Franklin stared up at me through the dirty water. It was a lot of money. It could have bought groceries for Jamal and Keisha for a week. But picking it up would have cost me something far more valuable. It would have cost me my soul. I looked up at Tiffany. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I just stood up straighter. I let the persona of the broken old man drop for just a second, and I let her see the eyes of the CEO who had crushed competitors for 4 decades. "I don't want your money, Tiffany," I said, my voice low and steady. "But mark my words. You will remember this moment. You will remember the day you threw charity in the mud instead of showing mercy. And when you are standing where I am standing, you will wish you had made a different choice." Tiffany took a step back. She looked frightened. For a second, she saw the power behind the rags, but then her friends started walking toward us, calling her name. The fear turned instantly into defensive rage. She needed to destroy me before I could destroy her social standing. She pulled out her phone. She didn't call Darnell. She dialed 3 numbers. 911, she screamed into the phone, her voice suddenly changing into a performance of a terrified victim. Yes, please send help. I am on Oak Street. There is an aggressive homeless man here. He is threatening me. He grabbed my arm. Please hurry. I am afraid for my life. I stared at her in disbelief. She was lying. She was looking me right in the eye while she told the police that I had assaulted her. She was weaponizing the law against a black man in a wealthy neighborhood. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that when the police arrived, they wouldn't ask questions first. They would see a rich white woman and a poor black man, and they would act accordingly. I had to run. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was a billionaire. I owned buildings in this city, but in this moment I was just a fugitive. I didn't say another word to her. I turned and walked away fast. I heard her shouting behind me, telling me to stop, but I didn't look back. I ducked into the alleyway between the boutiques. I moved past the dumpsters and the service entrances. I heard sirens wailing in the distance, getting closer. My heart was pounding in my chest. I felt a mixture of fear and cold fury. This was not just about money anymore. This was war. Tiffany had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She had tried to put me in a cage. I navigated through the back streets using the mental map of the city I had built over 50 years. I found a bus stop 3 blocks away on a quiet street. I pulled my hat down low over my eyes. When the bus came, I got on and moved to the back. I sat there shaking not from the cold but from the adrenaline. I looked out the window as the bus moved away from the Gold Coast. We passed the invisible line that separates the rich from the poor in Chicago. The buildings got shorter. The sidewalks got dirtier. The faces on the street changed from hopeful to hardened. I thought the worst part of my day was over. I thought the humiliation of having money thrown at me was the rock bottom. I was wrong. When the bus finally hissed to a halt near 47th Street, the sun was starting to set. The sky was a bruised purple color. I walked the 2 blocks to Jamal's garage. All I wanted was to sit on that lumpy sofa and listen to Keisha hum while she cooked. I wanted the safety of the only honest home I had left. But as I turned the corner onto Jamal's street, I heard the noise. It was the sound of metal on metal, the sound of shouting. I started to run. My bad knee protested, but I ignored it. When I got to the garage, I stopped dead in my tracks. There were 3 men standing in the forecourt. They were big men wearing thick jackets and holding baseball bats. A tow truck was backed up to the bay doors. One of the men swung his bat. Crash! The sign above the door, the one that said Jay's Auto Repair, shattered. The plastic letters rained down onto the concrete. "Hey!" I shouted, running toward them. "Hey, what are you doing?" Then I saw Jamal. He was standing in the doorway of the garage. He wasn't fighting back. He was holding his hands up, trying to protect Keisha, who was standing behind him, crying. "Please," Jamal was begging. "Please, just give me 2 more days. I have a job lined up. I can pay you on Friday." The leader of the group, a man with a scar running down his cheek, spit on the ground. "You said that last week, Jamal," the man said. "The bank sold your debt to us. We don't do extensions, we do liquidations." He signaled to the tow truck driver. "Hook it up," the man yelled. "Take the lift, take the compressor, take anything that isn't bolted down." "No," Jamal screamed, lunging forward. "You can't take the lift, that is my business. If you take that, I can't work." The man with the bat shoved Jamal back hard. My son stumbled and fell onto the oily pavement. Keisha screamed. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just reacted. I forgot that I was supposed to be a frail old man. I forgot that I was pretending to be broke. I saw my son on the ground and I felt a rage that turned my vision red. I ran past the tow truck. I placed myself between the man with the bat and my son. I stood there panting, my fists clenched, my eyes blazing. "Get away from him," I growled. The man with the bat laughed. He looked me up and down, taking in my dirty coat and my worn-out boots. "Look at this," he sneered. "Grandpa wants to play hero. Move aside, old man, before you break a hip." He raised the bat again, not to hit me, but to smash the window of the garage office. I stood my ground. I knew that if I fought them physically, I would lose. But I had a weapon they didn't know about. I had the confidence of a man who could buy their boss's boss with pocket change. But before I could speak, before I could offer them money or threaten them with the police, Jamal grabbed my ankle. "Dad, no," he whispered. "Don't. They will hurt you. Just let them take it. It is just stuff, Dad. It is just stuff." I looked down at Jamal. His face was bruised, his shop was being destroyed, and he was still trying to protect me. The man with the bat swung. Glass shattered everywhere. The tow truck engine roared to life. I stood there amidst the ruin of my son's dream, and I realized that the timeline had to move up. I couldn't wait a week. I couldn't wait 2 days. I had to end this. I reached into my pocket and gripped my phone. I needed Sterling. I needed the police. I needed the full force of my empire to descend on this street right now. But as I pulled my phone out, the man with the scar saw it. "No phones, Grandpa," he said. He swung the bat one more time. It hit my hand. Pain exploded up my arm. The phone flew out of my grip and skittered across the pavement, sliding right under the wheels of the tow truck. Crushed. Now we were truly alone. No phone, no money, no tools, just the sound of breaking glass and the cold wind of the south side blowing through the holes in our lives. The silence in the garage was unnatural. For years this place had echoed with the whine of air compressors and the clank of high-quality steel against engine blocks. Now it was quiet. Jamal was trying to loosen a rusted bolt on a '98 Honda Civic using a cheap wrench he had found under the workbench. It was the only tool he had left. I watched him struggle. His knuckles were white and sweat dripped from his nose onto the concrete. He slipped. The wrench flew out of his hand and clattered across the floor. He didn't curse. He just sighed a heavy, defeated sound that broke my heart more than any scream could. I was sitting in the corner on a folding chair pretending to read a newspaper I had pulled out of the trash. But I wasn't reading. I was waiting. I knew Darnell. I knew that his cruelty was not a passive thing. He didn't just ignore problems, he erased them. And right now, Jamal and I were the problems. I had a feeling in my gut, the same feeling I used to get before a hostile takeover, that the other shoe was about to drop. It arrived at 2 p.m. in the form of a sleek black sedan. It wasn't Darnell's car. It was a process server. A man in a cheap suit with dead eyes who looked like he delivered bad news for a living. He didn't even step fully into the garage. He just stood at the threshold, wrinkling his nose at the smell of oil. "Jamal Payne," he called out. Jamal wiped his hands on his pants and walked over. "Yes, that is me. You have been served." The man shoved a thick yellow envelope into Jamal's chest, turned on his heel, and walked away. He didn't wait for a signature. He didn't offer an explanation. He just got back into his air-conditioned car and drove off, leaving a cloud of dust that settled on my son's boots. Jamal opened the envelope. His hands were trembling. I saw his eyes scanning the document. I saw the moment the words hit him. His shoulders slumped as if an invisible weight had just been dropped on his back. He leaned against the door frame for support. "What is it, son?" I asked, although I already suspected the answer. Jamal didn't answer immediately. He walked over to me and handed me the paper. It was an eviction notice. But it wasn't a normal eviction notice. It was a notice of immediate lease termination due to a sale of the property. I read the fine print. The property had been purchased by a holding company called Apex Horizon LLC. I knew that name. It was a shell company Darnell used for his high-risk developments, and the purpose of the purchase was demolition. The document stated that the building was to be razed to make way for a new luxury condominium complex called the Painview. The audacity of it took my breath away. Darnell wasn't just kicking us out. He was planning to bulldoze his brother's livelihood to build a monument to his own ego, and he was going to name it after the family he was destroying. "We have 72 hours, Jamal whispered. His voice was hollow. 72 hours to vacate the premises, or the sheriff will come and remove us by force. He sank down onto the floor next to me, putting his head in his hands. "I called the landlord this morning," Jamal said, his voice muffled. "He wouldn't pick up. Now I know why. Darnell must have offered him double whatever the place is worth just to get us out today. He knew I couldn't fight it. He knew I don't have a lawyer." I looked at the paper again. It was a masterclass in legal bullying. There were clauses about safety violations that didn't exist and zoning changes that had been pushed through overnight. This was expensive work. Darnell had probably spent $20,000 in legal fees just to destroy his brother's $500 a week business. Keisha came down the stairs then. She saw us sitting on the floor. She saw the yellow paper. She didn't need to ask. She just sat down beside Jamal and wrapped her arms around him. She was 8 months pregnant, and she was the strongest person in the room. "We will find a way," she said softly, rocking him back and forth. "We always figure it out, baby." "There is no figuring this out, Keisha," Jamal said, looking up. His eyes were dry, but they were filled with a terrifying hopelessness. I sold my tools. I have no shop. And now we have no home. In 3 days, we are going to be on the street, with a baby coming. And Dad—" He stopped. He looked at me. The guilt in his eyes was unbearable. He felt like he had failed me. He felt like he had invited his father into a sanctuary only to have it burn down around us. I decided it was time to push him to the edge. I needed to hear it. I needed to know why he was doing this. "Jamal," I said, my voice raspy, "you need to be realistic. You can't take care of me anymore. Look at this mess. You are sinking, son." I struggled to stand up, leaning heavily on the workbench. "I will go to the shelter downtown," I said. "Or maybe I will sit in front of Darnell's house until the police arrest me. At least I will get a meal in jail. You take Keisha and go to her mother's house. Her mother has that small apartment in Ohio, right? Go there. Start over. Leave me here." Jamal stood up. He looked at me with an intensity I had never seen before. "No," he said. "Jamal, listen to me," I argued. "I am an anchor around your neck. You sold your tools for my medicine. Now you are losing your home because Darnell hates me. If I wasn't here, Darnell wouldn't be targeting you. I am the reason you are losing everything. Cut me loose, son. You will be lighter. You can run faster without an old man on your back." Jamal took 2 steps toward me. He grabbed my shoulders. His grip was firm. "Do you remember when I was 10 years old, Dad?" he asked. I looked at him confused. The question seemed to come out of nowhere. "We went hiking in Starved Rock," Jamal continued. "Darnell was 16. He ran ahead. He wanted to get to the summit first. He wanted to prove he was the fastest. But I slipped. I fell down that ravine and broke my leg. The bone was sticking out, Dad. It was bleeding." I remembered the scream. I remembered sliding down the mud to get to him. "Darnell didn't come back," Jamal said, his voice shaking. "He kept climbing. He shouted down that he would meet us at the car. He didn't want to ruin his time. But you didn't leave me." Tears started to well up in Jamal's eyes. "It was 5 miles back to the trailhead, Dad. 5 miles of uphill mud, of uphill. You were 40 years old. You picked me up. I was a heavy kid, but you put me on your back. It started raining. I was crying the whole way. I threw up on your jacket because of the pain, but you didn't put me down. Not once. You whispered to me the whole way. You told me stories to distract me. You told me we were a team." He paused, taking a deep breath. "You carried me when I couldn't walk, Dad. You carried me until your own legs were shaking. You didn't leave me behind because I was a burden. You didn't leave me because I slowed you down. You carried me because I was your son." He looked deep into my eyes. "Now it is my turn. My legs are strong, Dad. I don't care if Darnell takes the house. I don't care if he takes the garage. We can live in the truck. We can live in a tent. But as long as I have breath in my body, I am not leaving you behind. I am going to carry you now, just like you carried me. So don't you ever ask me to leave you again. Do you hear me?" I couldn't speak. I had a lump in my throat the size of a grapefruit. I had spent 40 years thinking I was teaching my sons how to be men. But standing there in that dusty garage, I realized that Jamal was the only one who had learned the lesson. Darnell had learned how to climb alone. Jamal had learned how to carry others. "Okay, son," I whispered. "Okay. We stay together." Just then, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then, with a final buzz, the overhead fluorescence died. The garage was plunged into the gray gloom of the late afternoon. The heater hummed to a stop. "He cut the power," Keisha said from the darkness. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the fear underneath. "He didn't wait 72 hours. He called the utility company." Of course he did. Darnell was thorough. He wanted to freeze us out. He wanted us to spend our last night in the cold and dark. He wanted to break our spirits so completely that we would crawl away and disappear. We made our way upstairs using the flashlights on our phones. The apartment was already getting cold. We didn't have much food left, just a can of beans and some stale bread. We sat around the small kitchen table. Keisha lit a single candle she had saved for emergencies. The small flame danced in the draft, casting long, flickering shadows on the peeling walls. We ate the cold beans in silence. The atmosphere should have been depressing. We were bankrupt, evicted, and freezing. But as I looked at Jamal and Keisha eating their meager dinner, holding hands across the table, I didn't feel depressed. I felt a cold, hard clarity. I looked at Jamal's face illuminated by the candlelight. He looked tired, but he didn't look broken. He looked like a man who was ready to fight the world for his family. He had passed every test I had thrown at him. He had sacrificed his tools, his home, and his comfort, and he had done it without knowing there was a reward. I took a bite of the cold beans. They were tasteless. But as I swallowed, I felt a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. It was the first time I had smiled in days. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf that has just realized the trap it stepped into is actually made of paper. Darnell thought he had won. He thought he was squeezing the life out of us. He had no idea that he was squeezing a detonator. I looked at the candle flame. It was small, but it was hot. It reminded me of Jamal, and it reminded me of myself before the money, before the suits, before the empire. I was a fighter then, and I was a fighter now. Enough, I said to myself. My voice was so low that neither Jamal nor Keisha heard me. Enough games, enough testing. I put my spoon down. I reached into my pocket and touched the burner phone. It was dead destroyed by the bat. But it didn't matter. I knew exactly where I had to go tomorrow. I looked at Jamal one last time. "Tomorrow is going to be a good day, son," I said, breaking the silence. Jamal looked at me sadly. He thought I was losing my mind. He thought I was senile. "Sure, Pops," he said, gently blowing out the candle to save the wax. "Let's just try to get some sleep." The room went pitch black. But in the darkness, my eyes were wide open. I wasn't sleeping tonight. I was rehearsing. Because tomorrow I wasn't going to be Augustus the homeless man anymore. Tomorrow I was going to be Augustus the CEO. And I had a board meeting to attend. A very special board meeting in a garage where the agenda was simple. Total annihilation of the opposition. Sleep well, Darnell, I thought as the cold air settled around us. Enjoy your heated floors and your Egyptian cotton sheets, because tomorrow the landlord is coming home, and he is bringing the eviction notice for you. The sun rose on our final morning in the garage, but it brought no warmth. The light that filtered through the dirty windows was gray and unforgiving, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the cold air. We had 24 hours left before the sheriff arrived to drag us out. We had packed what little we could into cardboard boxes. The garage, which had been Jamal's pride and joy, now looked like a skeleton. The tools gone, the shelves empty, the life drained out of it. I sat on the edge of the bed watching Jamal and Keisha in the kitchen area. They were whispering. I couldn't hear the words, but I understood the body language. Jamal was holding Keisha's hand, rubbing his thumb over her ring finger. Keisha was crying silently, tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks. They weren't fighting. It was something worse. They were saying goodbye to something. I saw Jamal slowly slide the gold band off his finger. It was a simple ring. I remembered when he bought it 5 years ago. He had saved for 6 months working double shifts, hiding cash in a coffee can. He didn't ask me for a dime because he wanted to be the man who provided for his wife. Now he was holding that circle of gold up to the light and his hand was trembling. Keisha took hers off too. It was a small diamond, a tiny chip really, but to her it was the hope diamond. She kissed it once before placing it in Jamal's palm. "We have to," Keisha whispered. Her voice carried across the silent room. "It is the deposit for the motel. We need a roof over our heads for the baby." "I know," Jamal replied, his voice cracking. "I know, baby. But I promised you forever. This ring, it was my promise. The promise is in your heart, not on your finger," Keisha said, touching his face. "Do it, Jamal. Do it for Dad. Do it for us." I turned my head away, pretending to look for my boots. My chest felt tight like a vice was crushing my ribs. I had $60 million sitting in a liquid asset account. I could have bought them a jewelry store. I could have bought them the diamond mine. But I sat there and let them sacrifice the symbol of their marriage to buy me a night in a cheap motel. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I had to see it through. I had to see the bottom of the well. I walked over to them, feigning ignorance. "What are you two doing?" I asked, rubbing my hands together to warm them. "Nothing," Pops, Jamal said quickly, shoving the rings into his pocket. We are going to run an errand. We need to pick up some supplies. I will come with you," I said. "I need to stretch my legs. This air is too stale." Jamal hesitated. He didn't want me to see. He didn't want his father to witness his shame. "It is going to be a long walk, Dad," he said. "I have walked further," I replied, putting on my coat. "Let's go, son." We walked 3 miles to the pawn shop district. It was a part of town where hope went to die. The storefronts were barred with iron cages. The windows were filled with the debris of broken lives, guitars that would never be played again, televisions that had watched happy families fall apart, and trays of wedding rings that had once been placed on fingers with promises of eternity. We stopped in front of a shop called Fast Cash Gold and Silver. The neon sign buzzed with an angry sound. "Wait here, Dad," Jamal said. "Please, just wait outside." "No," I said firmly. "It is cold out here. I am coming in." I pushed the door open. A bell jingled a cheerful sound that felt completely out of place. The smell inside was distinctive. It smelled of stale cigarettes, cheap cleaning fluid, and desperation. Behind the counter sat a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He was heavy-set with eyes that had seen every tragedy in the city and stopped caring decades ago. Jamal walked up to the counter. He moved slowly like a man walking to the gallows. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the 2 rings. He placed them on the glass counter. They made a small clinking sound. Clink, clink, the sound of a heart breaking in 2. "I need to sell these," Jamal said. His voice was low. The pawnbroker didn't look at Jamal. He didn't look at Keisha, who was clutching her stomach. He picked up the rings with thick, callous fingers. He pulled a jeweler's loop from his pocket and screwed it into his eye. He examined them for all of 10 seconds. 14 karat, he grunted. "The diamond is low grade, lots of inclusions." He dropped the rings onto a small digital scale. He wasn't treating them like memories. He was treating them like scrap metal. "I paid $2,000 for the set," Jamal said, trying to stand tall. 5 years ago. They are good quality." The broker laughed. It was a dry hacking sound. "You paid retail, kid. Retail is for suckers. I am paying melt value. Gold is down this week." He tapped a calculator. $300 for both. 300. Jamal gasped. "Man, come on. That is barely enough for a week at a motel. Look at the engraving. It says, 'Forever and always.' That is custom work." "I don't pay for sentiment," the broker said, bored. "I melt it down. The engraving disappears in the pot, just like everything else. 300, take it or leave it." I stood in the back of the shop near a rack of used power tools. My fists were clenched so hard my fingernails were digging into my palms. $300. That was what Darnell spent on a bottle of wine at dinner. That was what Tiffany spent on a grooming session for her poodle. And here was my son begging for it to save his family. "Please," Jamal pleaded. "Make it 500. My wife is pregnant. We are getting evicted today. Just help us out, man." The broker looked at Keisha. He looked at her belly. For a second I thought I saw a flicker of humanity, but then he looked back at the scale. 320, he said, "and that is me being a saint." Jamal looked at Keisha. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Okay," Jamal whispered. "Okay, we will take it." The transaction took 2 minutes. The broker counted out the money. $20 bills. Worn, dirty bills. He slid them across the counter. Jamal picked them up. He looked at his empty ring finger one last time. He rubbed the pale band of skin where the gold used to be. "Thank you," he said softly. They turned to leave. They walked past me, their heads bowed. They looked defeated. They looked like they had lost the war. "You go ahead," I said. My voice was steady. "I will catch up." I think I dropped my glove. "Dad, come on," Jamal said tiredly. "Go," I ordered. "I will be right behind you." They walked out the door, the bell jingling behind them. I watched through the window as they started walking down the street, holding hands, their fingers interlaced to hide the emptiness. As soon as they turned the corner, I turned back to the counter. The broker was already scooping the rings into a plastic bag labeled "Melt." "Don't touch them," I said. The broker looked up. He saw the old bum in the army jacket. "Get out of here, Pops," he sneered. "No loitering." I walked up to the counter. I didn't walk like a bum anymore. I leaned in close, my face inches from the safety glass. I said, "Don't touch them," I repeated. My voice was low, but it had the authority of a man who commanded fleets of ships and thousands of employees. The broker paused. He saw something in my eyes. Something dangerous. I pulled out my phone. It was the new one I had bought that morning to replace the one the thugs destroyed. I dialed a number. "Sterling," I said into the phone, never taking my eyes off the broker. "I am at Fast Cash on 47th. I need you to walk in here in exactly 5 minutes. Bring cash. $3,000. I listened for a second. Yes, I said. Buy them back. And pay this man whatever he wants to keep his mouth shut. Those rings do not leave this store until they are in your pocket. Do you understand? I hung up. The broker was staring at me, his mouth slightly open. Who are you? He asked, his voice wavering. I am the man who could buy this entire building and turn it into a parking lot by this afternoon, I said. You just ripped off my son. You are going to hold those rings right here. My lawyer is coming. If those rings are scratched, if they are melted, if they are moved 1 inch from that counter, I will bury you under so much litigation, your grandchildren will be paying legal fees. The broker swallowed hard. He took his hand off the bag. He pushed it toward me. Okay, he said, holding up his hands. Okay, buddy. No trouble. I will hold them. I turned and walked out of the shop. The bell jingled again. Outside, the air was still cold, but I felt a fire burning in my veins. I caught up with Jamal and Keisha 2 blocks away. I was panting slightly, playing the part of the old man. Found it, I said, waving my glove. Jamal looked at me. He tried to smile, but his eyes were dead. That is good, Pops, he said. At least we didn't lose the glove. We walked back to the garage in silence. When we got there, the sun was setting. The garage looked even emptier in the twilight. We sat on the floor of the apartment because we had packed the chairs. Jamal put the money on a box. $320. Well, he said, trying to sound cheerful. This will get us a room at the Motel 6 for a week. Maybe 10 days if we find a coupon. I will find a job by then. I will work day labor. We will be okay. Keisha rested her head on his shoulder. We have each other, she said. That is enough. I looked at them. I looked at their hands. The pale lines on their fingers were like scars. They had given up everything. They had stripped themselves bare of dignity, of possessions of security, just to keep me safe. I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The testing was over. The jury had deliberated and the verdict was in. Jamal Payne was the only true heir to my legacy. I stood up. My knees popped. I am going to sleep early tonight, I announced. You okay, Dad? Jamal asked, worried. I am fine, son, I said. I just need to rest. Tomorrow is a big day. Jamal looked confused. Big day. We are getting evicted, Dad. It is going to be a terrible day. I walked to the bedroom area. I turned back to look at them one last time. You never know, Jamal, I said with a small, mysterious smile. Sometimes the darkest hour is just before the dawn. I lay down on the bed. I closed my eyes. But I didn't sleep. I lay there visualizing the next 24 hours. I visualized the look on Darnell's face. I visualized the look on Tiffany's face. But most of all, I visualized the moment I would put those rings back on Jamal and Keisha's fingers. It was time. The lion had been sleeping in the grass, watching the hyenas circle. But the sleep was over. Tomorrow, the lion would roar, and the whole city of Chicago was going to hear it. Judgment Day had arrived. 74 years is a long time to live. You see a lot of things change in 3/4 of a century. You see presidents come and go. You see neighborhoods rise and fall. You see technology turn the world upside down. But the one thing that never changes is the feeling of a birthday. It is that one day a year where you are supposed to stop and measure your life. You look at who is standing beside you, and you know exactly what you are worth. I sat on a plastic crate in the middle of the empty garage. The wind was rattling the bay door like a ghost trying to get in. It was March 12th, my birthday. In the past, this day meant a black-tie dinner at the Signature Room on the 95th floor of the Hancock Center. It meant vintage scotch and imported cigars. It meant Darnell and Marcus toasting to my health while they mentally calculated how much longer I had left. Tonight, my party was a little different. There was no white tablecloth. There was just a cardboard box overturned to make a table. There was no steak. There were 3 cans of store-brand soda and a small box from the grocery store bakery. Happy birthday, Pops. Jamal placed the box on the cardboard. He opened it carefully like it contained crown jewels. Inside was a single vanilla cupcake with white frosting. It was slightly smashed on one side, probably from the walk home. Stuck right in the middle was one blue candle. I looked at that cupcake. I knew they had spent their last few dollars on it. They had sold their wedding rings yesterday to pay for a motel room we hadn't even checked into yet, and they still managed to scrape together $3 for this. Make a wish, Dad, Keisha said. She was sitting on the floor, leaning against Jamal. Her face was pale from the stress and the pregnancy, but her eyes were shining. I looked at the flame flickering in the drafty garage. I thought about what I should wish for. A warm bed, a hot meal, my company back. But as I looked at my son and his wife huddled in their coats, smiling at me with genuine love, I realized I didn't need to wish for those things. I had the only thing that mattered. I blew out the candle. The smoke drifted up into the darkness. "What did you wish for?" Jamal asked, handing me the cupcake. I broke it into 3 pieces. I wished for clarity, I said, handing a piece to him and a piece to Keisha. And I think I finally got it. We ate the cake in silence. The sugar hit my system and gave me a little jolt of energy. It was dry and the frosting was waxy, but it was the best cake I had ever tasted because it wasn't bought with obligation. It was bought with sacrifice. Jamal pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. I thought maybe we could listen to some music, he said, or maybe watch the news, just to pass the time. He propped the phone up against a toolbox. He opened a local news app. I wasn't really paying attention. I was just enjoying the moment of peace. But then I heard a voice that made my blood turn to ice. "We are live here at the Drake Hotel for the annual charity gala supporting Chicago's future." I looked at the tiny screen. The reporter was standing in a ballroom that looked like a palace. Crystal chandeliers, waiters in tuxedos carrying silver trays, and standing right there in the center of the frame holding a microphone and looking like $1 million was Marcus. "Turn it up," I whispered. Jamal hesitated. "Dad, you don't want to see this." "Turn it up," I commanded. Jamal tapped the screen. The volume rose. Marcus's voice filled the empty garage. He was polished. He was charismatic. He was lying through his teeth. "And that is why family is the cornerstone of my campaign," Marcus was saying. His smile was dazzling. "My father, Augustus Payne, taught me that you never leave a man behind. He taught me that success means nothing if you don't share it with the people you love. That is the spirit I want to bring to the city council. Compassion, loyalty, integrity." The camera panned out. I saw Darnell standing next to him, nodding solemnly. Tiffany was there too, wearing a dress that sparkled under the lights. They looked like the perfect American family. The reporter thrust the microphone back at Marcus. "That is inspiring, Mr. Payne. And how is your father doing? We haven't seen him in public lately." Marcus didn't even blink. He put on a face of practiced concern, a mask of sorrow that was so convincing it almost made me sick. "Dad is struggling," he said softly, lowering his head. "His health has taken a turn. He is resting at a private facility in Switzerland. He wanted to be here tonight, but the doctors advised against travel. But I know he is watching. We love you, Dad." Darnell stepped up and put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "We are just trying to honor his legacy," Darnell added. "He built this family from nothing. We are just the caretakers of his dream." I watched them, my 2 sons, my flesh and blood. They were standing in a room full of millionaires drinking champagne paid for by the profits of the company I built using my name to climb the social ladder while I sat in a freezing garage eating a smashed cupcake. They had literally shipped me off to Switzerland in the eyes of the public while hoping I would rot in a gutter in reality. Jamal reached out and turned the phone off. The garage went silent again. "They are monsters," Jamal whispered. His fists were clenched. "How can they lie like that? I am going to go down there. I am going to walk right into that ballroom and tell everyone the truth." "No," I said. My voice was calm, dangerous calm. "You don't go to them, Jamal. You never chase the enemy when they are making a mistake. You let them come to you." I stood up. I walked over to the corner of the room where I had stashed a notepad and a pen. I sat down on the crate. I clicked the pen. "What are you doing?" Dad, Keisha asked. "I am sending out invitations," I said. I wrote 3 notes. The handwriting was shaky, not because I was weak, but because I was furious. The first note was for Darnell. "I am going into the county shelter system tomorrow morning. I know I have been a burden. Before I go, I found some old papers in my box. Stocks, bonds, transfer deeds. I don't understand them anymore. My mind is going. I want to sign them over to you so the government doesn't take them. Come to the garage tomorrow night at 7 p.m. One last dinner. Then I will disappear." The second note was for Marcus. "I saw you on TV. You looked good, son. I don't want to ruin your campaign. I have a file of old contacts, union leaders, donors, people who owe me favors. I want to give it to you before I check into the poorhouse. Come tomorrow at 7 p.m. Bring the papers for me to sign away my rights. I am ready to let go." I folded the notes. I looked at Jamal. "Do you have enough gas in the truck to make one delivery run?" I asked. Jamal looked at the notes. He read them. He looked up at me confused. "Dad, you don't have stocks. You don't have contacts. You said you lost everything. Why are you lying to them? And why would you invite them here? They treated you like garbage." "I am not lying," I said. My eyes were hard. "I do have stocks. I do have contacts. They just don't know that I still own them. And as for why I am inviting them, because greed is a powerful magnet, son." I handed the notes to Jamal. "Drop these off at the hotel valet. Tell them it is urgent family business. They will get them." Jamal took the notes. He didn't understand. He thought I was a senile old man trying to buy back the love of his sons with imaginary gifts. But he respected me too much to argue. He left. I heard the truck cough to life and fade into the distance. Keisha and I sat in the dark. "Dad," she said softly. "What are you planning?" I looked at her. "I am planning a funeral, Keisha," I said. She gasped. "Don't say that, Dad." "You are not dying?" "No," I said, smiling in the dark. "Not my funeral." An hour later, Jamal returned. He looked disgusted. "I gave them the notes," he said. "I saw Darnell come out to the valet stand. He read it right there under the awning, and I asked, leaning forward. He laughed." Jamal said. "He actually laughed. He showed it to Marcus. They high-fived, Dad. I saw them high-five." Darnell said something to the valet like, "Finally the old man is cashing out." I nodded. It was exactly what I expected. They weren't coming because they missed me. They weren't coming to wish me a happy birthday. They were coming to pick the carcass clean. They were coming to make sure I signed a waiver releasing them from any financial responsibility so they could dump me in a state-run facility without guilt. They wanted to make sure I didn't have a secret stash of money that the government would seize. "They texted me 5 minutes ago," Jamal continued. He held up his phone. The text from Darnell read, "We will be there. 7 p.m. sharp. Have the papers ready. We have a dinner reservation at 9, so we can't stay long. Make sure the place is clean." I leaned back against the cold brick wall. The trap was set. They thought they were coming to a garage to sign papers with a broke, helpless old man. They had no idea they were walking into a courtroom. Tomorrow night wasn't just going to be a dinner. It was going to be an execution. I was going to strip them of everything they held dear. Their pride, their money, their reputation. And I was going to do it while eating cheap takeout in the freezing cold. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered to the empty room. The wind howled outside. It sounded like applause. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in weeks, I slept like a baby. The lion was awake, and he was hungry. The garage door rattled as a gust of wind hit it, but the sound was drowned out by the purr of expensive engines outside. I sat at the folding table in the center of the room. I had positioned myself carefully. The single light bulb hanging from the ceiling cast deep shadows across my face, making me look even more gaunt and tired than I actually was. I wrapped the old wool blanket tighter around my shoulders and let my hand rest on the table. It was shaking rhythmically, a performance I had perfected over the last 3 days. Jamal stood behind me. His hand was on my shoulder. I could feel the tension radiating off him like heat. He didn't want this meeting. He wanted to bar the door and tell his brothers to go to hell. But he trusted me. He stayed because I asked him to. Keisha was in the corner, sitting on a crate, her arms wrapped around her belly, her eyes wide and watchful. The side door swung open. The smell of the garage changed instantly. The scent of old oil and rust was overpowered by the aggressive fragrance of Chanel perfume and expensive leather. Tiffany walked in first. She was wearing a white coat that looked like it was made of clouds. She took one step onto the concrete floor and stopped. She looked down at her shoes, then up at the ceiling where a spiderweb swayed in the draft. She pulled a silk handkerchief from her pocket and pressed it to her nose, her eyes crinkling in disgust. Darnell followed her. He was wearing a camel hair coat and a scarf that probably cost more than Jamal's truck. He didn't look at me. He looked at the walls. He looked at the empty shelves. He was assessing the value of the property one last time, making sure his demolition plans were sound. Then came Marcus. He walked in with the stride of a man who thinks he owns the room. He was followed by a man I didn't recognize. A man in a sharp gray suit carrying a leather briefcase. A lawyer. Not the family lawyer. Not Sterling. This was a hired gun. Someone brought in to handle dirty work. "Hello, Dad," Marcus said. His voice was flat. He didn't come over to hug me. He didn't offer a handshake. He stayed on the other side of the table using the distance as a shield. "You came," I whispered, making my voice sound thin and brittle. "We are busy men, Dad," Darnell said, checking his watch. "We have a dinner reservation at Le Monde in an hour. Let's make this quick. You said you had papers. You said you had assets to transfer." I nodded slowly. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a stack of crumpled envelopes. They were junk mail mostly, old flyers, but to them they looked like treasure. I don't want the government to take it," I wheezed. "I want you boys to have it." Tiffany stepped forward, but she didn't come to the table. She looked around for a chair. There was only one other folding chair, and it had a stain on the seat. "I am not sitting on that," she announced, her voice echoing in the small space. "It is filthy. Darnell, this place is a health hazard. I feel like I need a tetanus shot just standing here." "Just stand then," Tiffany Darnell snapped. He was focused on the envelopes in my hand. His eyes were greedy. Marcus stepped up to the table. He placed his hands on the plastic surface and leaned in. "We appreciate the gesture, Dad," he said, using his politician voice. "It is the responsible thing to do. But before we look at your papers, we need you to sign something for us." He nodded to the lawyer in the gray suit. The man stepped forward and opened his briefcase. The click of the latches sounded like gunshots in the quiet garage. He pulled out a document. It was thick, bound in a blue folder. He slid it across the table toward me. "What is this?" I asked, staring at the legal jargon. "It is for your own good, Dad," Marcus said, smoothing his tie. "It is a guardianship agreement and a medical power of attorney." I looked at the words. Involuntary commitment, competency hearing, state custody. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just a transfer of assets. This was a death sentence. They weren't planning to put me in a nice retirement home. They were planning to declare me mentally incompetent. They were planning to lock me away in a state facility for the indigent so they wouldn't have to pay a dime for my care. They wanted to erase me. "We found a place for you," Darnell said. "It is called Sunny Meadows. It is state-run. It is basic. But it is all we can manage right now, Dad. You understand, right? Money is tight. Sunny Meadows, I knew that place. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. A place where old people were sedated and left to stare at walls until they died." "You want to put me away?" I said, looking up at them. "You think I am crazy." "We think you are confused," Marcus corrected. "Look at you, Dad. You are living in a garage. You are pretending to be poor. You are hallucinating about business deals. You need professional help. Just sign the paper. It gives us full control. We will handle the assets you think you have, and we will make sure you are safe." Jamal stepped out from behind me. He snatched the paper off the table. He read the first page. His hands started to shake, not from fear, but from rage. "You have got to be kidding me," he shouted. "You are committing him. You are trying to put him in the psych ward. It is for his own good," Jamal Darnell said dismissively. "Stay out of this. You are obviously not equipped to care for him. Look at this place. You are being evicted tomorrow. You are dragging him down with you. I am dragging him down." Jamal laughed, a bitter, incredulous sound. "I sold my wedding ring to feed him. I sold my tools to buy his medicine. What have you done? You threw him out in a blizzard, and now we are here to clean up the mess." Marcus interrupted, his voice cold and hard. "Give me the pen. Dad signed the paper. If you sign it voluntarily, we can get you a bed by tomorrow night. If you don't, we will have to call the sheriff and have you detained. It will be ugly." "You don't want that," Jamal roared. It was a sound of pure, primal fury. He lunged across the table. He grabbed Marcus by the lapels of his expensive suit. "Get out!" Jamal screamed. "Get out of my house! If you touch him, I will kill you!" Marcus stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. The lawyer took a step back, clutching his briefcase. Darnell stepped forward, raising his fists. "Don't touch him, you loser!" Darnell yelled. "Stop!" I said it quietly, but I put every ounce of authority I had into the word. I reached up and grabbed Jamal's wrist. "Stop, son," I said. "Let him go." Jamal looked down at me. His chest was heaving. There were tears in his eyes. "Dad, they are trying to lock you up," he whispered. "They are monsters. I know I said softy. I know. But violence is not the way. Sit down, son. Please. For me." Jamal hesitated. He looked at Marcus, who was straightening his jacket, and looking at Jamal with pure hatred. Then Jamal slowly released his grip. He stepped back, but he stood right beside me, his body tense like a coiled spring ready to snap. I pulled the paper back toward me. I picked up the pen. It was a cheap plastic pen with the cap chewed off. The room went silent. All eyes were on my hand. Tiffany stopped checking her phone. Darnell leaned in. Marcus held his breath. They were watching the final obstacle to their freedom disappear. Once I signed this, they would have my power of attorney. They would have control over everything. They would realize later that the assets I had were real, but by then I would be locked away and they would be spending my millions. I held the pen over the signature line. My hand trembled. "I have one question," I said. I kept my eyes on the paper. "Make it fast," Dad, Darnell said. "We have reservations." I looked up. I looked Darnell right in the eye. Then I looked at Marcus. Then I looked at Tiffany. I let my gaze linger on each of them, letting them see the tears in my eyes. "Is there no love left?" I asked. My voice cracked. "Not money, not duty, just love. Is there any part of you that remembers I am your father, that remembers I taught you to walk, that remembers I sat up with you when you were sick? Is there any part of you that loves me enough to just take care of me, without this paper, without the state facility, just family?" The silence that followed was heavy. For a second I thought I saw Marcus waver. He looked down at his shoes, but then he looked at his watch. Darnell let out a short, cruel laugh. He shook his head as if I had told a joke he didn't quite get. "Oh, Dad," he said, "you always were a romantic, but let me tell you something about the real world. The world you built." He leaned across the table, his face inches from mine. I could smell the wine on his breath. "Love is a luxury for people who can afford it," he sneered. "Love doesn't pay the mortgage on a $3 million house. Love doesn't get you elected to city council. And love certainly doesn't pay the bills at the nursing home." He tapped the paper with his index finger. "Sign the paper, old man. Do us all a favor and just fade away. You had your time, now it is ours." I looked at him. I looked at the face of the boy I had raised, the boy I had spoiled, and I saw nothing but a stranger with a hole where his heart should be. I looked at Tiffany. She rolled her eyes. "Just sign it," she muttered. "My feet are killing me." I looked at Marcus. "It is for the best, Dad," he said, looking away. I nodded. A slow, heavy nod. "You are right, Darnell," I said. My voice wasn't trembling anymore. "You are absolutely right. Love doesn't pay the bills." I gripped the pen tighter. "But justice does," I whispered. I lowered the pen to the paper. They all leaned in, expecting the scratch of ink. But I didn't write. Instead, I turned the pen upside down. I lifted my hand and brought the plastic end down on the wooden table. Tap. The sound was sharp in the silence. They frowned, confused. Tap. Darnell looked at Marcus. "What is he doing?" Tap. 3 strikes, like a judge's gavel ending a trial. I put the pen down. I sat back in my chair. I stopped shaking. I pulled the blanket off my shoulders and let it drop to the floor, revealing the shirt underneath. It was dirty, but my posture had changed. I wasn't hunched over anymore. I was sitting straight, my chin up, my eyes clear and cold as ice. "What is going on?" Marcus asked, taking a step back. "Why are you looking at us like that?" I didn't answer. I just looked at the garage door. 3, 2, 1. The sound of tires screeching outside broke the silence. Heavy tires. Not a tow truck, not a police car. The bay door of the garage didn't just open. It rose smoothly, activated by a remote control that wasn't supposed to work because the power was cut. But Sterling was efficient. Light flooded the garage. Not the dim yellow light of the street lamps, but the blinding white beams of high-intensity headlights. 2 black SUVs pulled into the driveway, blocking the exit, and between them a Rolls-Royce Phantom gliding like a shark through dark water stopped right at the threshold. The doors opened. 4 men in suits stepped out of the SUVs. They were big. They were serious. And they weren't the police. They were private security. Then the back door of the Rolls-Royce opened. Sterling stepped out. He was holding a briefcase, but not a cheap leather one like the man inside. He was holding a platinum-reinforced case that I used for billion-dollar acquisitions. Darnell spun around. Tiffany gasped, clutching her purse. Marcus looked at the car and his face went white. He knew that car. Everyone in the business world knew that car. "What is this?" Darnell shouted, trying to regain control. "Who are you people?" Sterling ignored him. He walked straight past Darnell. He walked past Marcus. He walked past the trembling lawyer. He walked right up to the folding table where I was sitting. He placed the briefcase on the table right on top of the guardianship papers. He clicked it open. He didn't speak to them. He looked only at me. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of supreme respect. "Good evening, Mr. Chairman," Sterling said, his voice calm and professional. "The board is assembled. The assets have been secured, and the transfer of power is ready for your signature." I stood up. My knees didn't pop. My back didn't ache. I stood up to my full height of 6 feet 2 inches. I looked at my sons who were staring at me as if I had just risen from the dead. I looked at Darnell. "You said love doesn't pay the bills, son. You are right." I reached into the briefcase and pulled out a check. A single check. I held it up. "But $60 million does." The look on their faces was worth every second of freezing in this garage. It was the look of men who realized they had just sold their souls for pennies, and the devil had come to collect. The blinding white light from the headlights cut through the gloom of the garage like a physical force. Dust motes danced in the beams, creating a surreal stage for what was about to happen. For a moment, no one moved. Darnell, Marcus, and Tiffany were frozen like deer, caught in the glare, their eyes squinting against the sudden brightness. Jamal stood beside me, his hand hovering near my shoulder, ready to defend me from whatever new threat had just arrived. He thought it was the police. He thought it was the sheriff coming to drag us out a day early, but I knew better. I knew the specific hum of that engine. It was a V12 engine, so quiet it whispered, but so powerful it could move mountains. The driver's side door opened. A man in a black suit stepped out. He was huge, a wall of muscle, with an earpiece coiled like a snake behind his ear. He didn't look at Darnell or Marcus. He walked around to the rear passenger door with a precision that spoke of military training. He opened the door and stood back, his hand resting on the frame to protect the head of the person inside. A shoe stepped out onto the cracked concrete of the driveway. It was an Oxford brogue, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the harsh garage lights. Then the rest of the man emerged. He was tall, elegant, and wore a suit that cost more than this entire building. He had silver hair swept back perfectly, and carried a briefcase that looked like it was made of woven carbon fiber and platinum. The silence in the garage was absolute. You could hear the wind outside, but inside it was dead quiet. Tiffany was the first to find her voice. It was a strangled squeak of disbelief. "Oh my God," she whispered. Her hand flew to her mouth. That is Arthur Sterling." Darnell spun around to look at her, his face a mask of confusion. "Who?" Darnell asked. "Arthur Sterling," Tiffany hissed. "The managing partner of Sterling and Associates. He represents the mayor. He represents the biggest corporations in the state. Darnell, he is the most expensive lawyer in Chicago. What the hell is he doing here?" Marcus looked like he was about to be sick. He knew exactly who Sterling was. He had probably tried to get a meeting with him for his campaign and been rejected. Sterling walked into the garage. He didn't look at the puddles of oil on the floor. He didn't look at the peeling paint on the walls. He walked with the confidence of a man who brought his own atmosphere with him. 2 more bodyguards followed him silently, taking up positions by the door, blocking the exit. Darnell tried to step forward. He adjusted his scarf, trying to look important. "Mr. Sterling," Darnell said, his voice cracking slightly, "this is a surprise. I am Darnell Payne. We met at the—" Sterling didn't even slow down. He walked right past Darnell as if he were a piece of furniture. He didn't even blink. The disrespect was so complete, so calculated, that Darnell actually took a step back, his mouth hanging open. Sterling walked past Marcus. Marcus shrank back against the wall, clutching his guardianship papers like a shield. Sterling walked straight to the folding table. He stopped in front of me. I was still sitting there, slumped in my chair, wrapped in the old wool blanket. I looked like a beggar. I looked like nothing. Sterling placed the briefcase on the table. He clicked the latches open. Snap, snap. The sound echoed like gunshots. Then he did something that made Tiffany gasp out loud. He bowed. It wasn't a quick nod. It was a deep, formal bow of respect. A bow you give to a king. "Good evening, Mr. Chairman," Sterling said. His voice was smooth baritone and filled with deference. "I apologize for the delay. The traffic on the Dan Ryan was unexpected." I looked up at him. I let the silence hang for a few seconds, letting the tension build until it was almost suffocating. "Is it done, Sterling?" I asked. My voice wasn't raspy anymore. It was low and steady. "It is done," Sir Sterling replied. The merger with the Japanese logistics firm was finalized at 4 p.m. Tokyo time. The funds have been cleared. $60 million has been deposited into your private holding account. The transfer deeds for the properties have also been executed. You are now the sole owner of the new downtown complex. Darnell dropped the pen he was holding. It clattered on the floor, rolling under the table. What? Darnell whispered. What did you just say? Sterling turned slowly to look at Darnell. He looked at him with the same expression one might use when looking at a stain on a rug. I was speaking to my client, Mr. Payne, Sterling said coldly. I believe you were just leaving, were you not? Marcus stepped forward. His face was pale, his eyes darting between me and the briefcase. Client Marcus stammered. Wait, there must be a mistake. My father is bankrupt. He lost the company. He is indigent. We are here to sign his commitment papers. He is confused, Mr. Sterling. He has dementia. I started to laugh. It started as a low chuckle in my chest and grew until it filled the room. It was a dry, dark laugh, the laugh of a man who has watched a play knowing the ending the whole time. I stood up. I didn't struggle to my feet. I didn't groan. I stood up in one fluid motion. I reached up and untied the knot of the dirty wool blanket. I let it slide off my shoulders and pool on the floor like a shed skin. Underneath, I was wearing a stained flannel shirt, but the way I wore it had changed. My shoulders went back. My spine straightened. I seemed to grow 3 inches in height. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a clean white handkerchief. I wiped my face, removing the smudge of grease I had planted on my cheek 3 days ago. I wiped my eyes. When I lowered the cloth, the foggy, confused look was gone. In its place was the sharp, piercing gaze that had made union leaders sweat across the negotiating table for 40 years. I looked at Marcus. I am not confused, son, I said. My voice was crisp. Every syllable was enunciated perfectly. I have never been more clear in my life. I walked around the table. I moved with energy, with power. I walked up to Marcus until I was inches from his face. He flinched. He actually flinched. Dementia, I repeated, tasting the word. Is that what you call it when someone outsmarts you? Is that what you call it when you are too blind to see what is right in front of you? I turned to Darnell. And you, bankrupt. You didn't even check the public filings, Darnell. You just believed what you wanted to believe because it suited your narrative. You wanted me to be weak so you could feel strong. You wanted me to be poor so you didn't have to feel grateful. Tiffany was shaking. She was looking at the briefcase, then at me, then at Sterling. But the house, she stammered. You were on the street. You begged us for food. I turned my gaze to her. It was like turning a spotlight on a cockroach. I begged you for nothing, Tiffany, I said. I gave you an opportunity to show decency, an opportunity to show that you were more than just a parasite living off my son's inheritance. And you threw it on the ground, literally. I pointed to the spot on the floor where my blanket lay. You threw $100 in the mud, I said. Do you remember what I told you? I told you that you would remember that moment. I walked back to the table. Sterling handed me a document from the briefcase. This is the deed to your house, Darnell, I said, holding it up. The bank called the note this morning. They were going to foreclose because you are 3 months behind on your mortgage. Did you think I didn't know that? Did you think I didn't know you were drowning in debt trying to keep up appearances? Darnell went white. How do you know that? I know everything, I said, slamming the paper down on the table. I bought the note, Darnell. I own your mortgage. I own your house. I own the roof over your head and the floor under your feet. I picked up another document. And this. This is the donor list for your campaign, Marcus. Marcus gasped. I see here that 60% of your funding comes from a shell corporation called Cicero Holdings, I said, reading the paper. Guess who owns Cicero Holdings? Marcus looked like he was going to faint. He grabbed the edge of the workbench to steady himself. You, Marcus whispered. Me, I said. I have been funding your vanity project for 6 months because I wanted to see if you would actually do something good with it. But instead you used it to talk about family values while trying to lock your own father in a psych ward. I tore the paper in half. Rip! The sound was loud and violent. The funding is cut, I said, dropping the pieces on the floor. Cicero Holdings is closed. Your campaign is over, Marcus. The room was spinning for them. I could see it. Their reality was collapsing. The old man they came to pity and discard was suddenly the giant they had feared all their lives. Jamal was standing in the corner. He hadn't moved. His mouth was slightly open. He was looking at me like I was a stranger, but not with fear. With awe. Dad, Jamal whispered. You were testing us. I turned to him. My face softened instantly. The ice melted from my eyes. "Yes, son," I said gently. "I was." I walked over to Jamal. I took his grease-stained hands in mine. "I had to know," I said. "I had to know who was real. When you have money, Jamal, everyone is your friend. Everyone loves you. But when the money is gone, that is when you see the truth. That is when you see who is standing next to you because they love you, and who is standing next to you because they are waiting to pick your pockets." I looked back at Darnell and Marcus. "I found my answer," I said. Sterling stepped forward again. He pulled a set of keys from his pocket. "Not car keys, building keys," Mr. Payne Sterling said, addressing Jamal. "Your father has instructed me to transfer the title of the new Payne Logistics Service Center to your name. It is a state-of-the-art facility, 10 bays, 5 lifts, a fully stocked retail front, and it comes with a starting operating budget of $2 million. Jamal looked at the keys. He looked at me. He looked at Keisha. Keisha covered her mouth to stifle a sob. "Dad," Jamal said, tears spilling over. I can't take this. It is too much. It is payment," Jamal, I said firmly. "It is payment for the wedding ring you sold. It is payment for the tools you sacrificed. It is payment for the sausage you gave me when you were starving. You didn't just give me food, son. You gave me my dignity back." I turned to Darnell and Marcus. They were silent, defeated, small. "And as for you two," I said, my voice hardening again. "Sterling, hand me the pen." Sterling handed me a gold fountain pen, not the chewed-up plastic one, a real pen. I picked up the guardianship papers Marcus had brought, the papers that were supposed to imprison me. "I am going to sign this," I said. Marcus looked up, hope flickering in his eyes for a second. I flipped to the back page. I wrote in big, bold letters across the signature line, "Rejected." I threw the papers at Marcus. They fluttered against his chest and fell to the floor. "Get out," I said. They didn't move. They were too shocked. I said, "Get out," I roared. My voice shook the dust from the rafters. "Get out of my garage, get out of my life, and don't you dare come back until you have learned what it means to be a human being." Darnell turned and ran. He didn't even wait for Tiffany. He just ran out the door into the night. Tiffany scrambled after him, her heels clicking frantically. Marcus stood there for 1 second longer. He looked at me. He looked at the wreckage of his political career lying on the floor. Then he turned and walked out. His head hung low, stripped of all his arrogance. The sound of their engines fading away was the sweetest music I had ever heard. The garage was quiet again. But it wasn't the silence of despair anymore. It was the silence of a battlefield, after the victory has been won. I looked at Jamal. I looked at Keisha. I looked at Sterling, who was smiling a rare, genuine smile. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of oil and victory. "Sterling," I said. "Yes, sir. I think we need a new sign for this place. Something bigger. Maybe Payne and Son." Jamal looked at me. He smiled. A real smile that lit up the whole room. "Payne and Son," he repeated. "I like that sound of that, Pops." I put my arm around his shoulder. "So do I, son," I said. "So do I." But the night wasn't over. There was one loose end left to tie up, one final act of justice that needed to be served before I could truly rest. I looked at the gold pen in my hand. I had taken back my company. I had taken back my dignity. But there was still the matter of a certain pawn shop owner who thought he could prey on the desperate. "Sterling," I said, "did you get the rings?" Sterling tapped his breast pocket. "Right here, sir. And I took the liberty of buying the building the pawn shop is located in. The eviction notice is already being drafted." I laughed. "Excellent. Let's go home, Jamal." "Not to the motel. We are going to the penthouse tonight. And tomorrow we start building the empire again. But this time we build it right." I walked out of the garage into the cold Chicago night, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt only the warmth of the future. The kinsman redeemer had come, and he had brought the fire with him. The silence in the garage was heavy enough to crush a man. It was the kind of silence that usually happens right before a tornado touches down. Sterling had placed the briefcase on the cheap folding table and stepped back, his hands clasped behind his back like a sentinel. All eyes were on that platinum case. It sat there gleaming under the harsh workshop lights, a stark contrast to the grease-stained concrete floor and the peeling paint of the walls. It looked like an alien artifact that had landed in the middle of a ruin. I looked at Darnell. He was staring at the case with a mixture of greed and terror. He knew what kind of business Sterling handled. He knew that Sterling didn't make house calls for bankruptcy filings. He made them for acquisitions. I reached out and flipped the latch of the case. The sound was sharp, a metallic click that echoed off the metal roof. I opened the lid. Inside, there were no stacks of gold bars or diamonds. There was something far more powerful. There was a single thick document bound in blue leather and a bank statement printed on heavy watermarked paper. I picked up the statement. My hand was steady. I felt the weight of the paper between my fingers. I looked at the number at the bottom of the page. It was a number that represented 40 years of missed birthdays, late nights, and ruthless negotiation. It was a number that had cost me my youth but secured my legacy. I didn't hand it to them. I slid it across the table. It hissed against the plastic surface, coming to rest right in front of Darnell. "Read it," I said softly. "Read the bottom line." Darnell looked down. He didn't want to look. He wanted to run, but the number pulled him in like gravity. I saw his eyes scan the page. I saw his pupils dilate. I saw his mouth open slightly as his brain tried to comprehend what he was seeing. 60, he stammered. "Read it all," I commanded. "Read the whole number, Darnell." $60 million, Darnell whispered. His voice was trembling. 60 million in liquid assets. Tiffany gasped. She pushed past Darnell, her high heels scraping on the concrete. She looked at the paper over his shoulder. Her eyes went wide. She grabbed Darnell's arm, digging her nails into his expensive coat. "Oh my God," she breathed. "It is real." "Darnell, look at the date. It is today's date." She looked up at me. The disgust that had been on her face just minutes ago, the look she gave me when she thought I was a dirty old man, was gone. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated hunger. It was the look of a starving wolf spotting a wounded deer. You aren't broke," she said. "No," I said, standing tall. "I am not broke." I walked around the table, slowly pacing like a predator circling its prey. "I didn't lose the company," I said, my voice filling the room. "I sold it. I spent the last 6 months negotiating the biggest merger in the history of the logistics industry. The Japanese wanted my routes, they wanted my infrastructure, and they were willing to pay a premium for it." I stopped in front of Marcus, who was still clutching the rejection of his guardianship papers. "I told everyone I was in trouble," I continued. "I told everyone I was losing my mind. I told everyone the money was gone, because I needed to know something. I needed to know who was waiting for me at the finish line. Was it my family, or was it a pack of vultures waiting for the carcass to drop?" I looked at Darnell. He was pale, sweating profusely despite the cold. "You thought I was weak," I said. "You thought I was a burden. You did the math, Darnell. You calculated the cost of my food, the cost of my room, and you decided I wasn't a profitable investment." Darnell tried to speak, but no words came out. He just shook his head. "And now," I said, gesturing to the bank statement, "now you see the return on investment you missed. You missed the windfall of a lifetime because you were too cheap to buy your own father a sandwich." The realization hit them like a physical blow. They weren't just looking at money they couldn't have. They were looking at the life they had just thrown away. They were looking at the private jets, the vacation homes, the power and influence that had been within their grasp. And they had lost it all because of their own cruelty. Then it happened. The transformation. It was instantaneous and sickening. Tiffany let go of Darnell's arm. She took a step toward me. Her face crumpled into a mask of exaggerated sorrow. Tears that hadn't been there a second ago suddenly welled up in her eyes. She clasped her hands together in a prayer-like gesture. "Oh, Dad," she wailed. Her voice was high and pitchy. "Oh, Daddy, please, you have to understand." She lunged at me. She threw herself onto the dirty concrete floor right at my feet. She wrapped her arms around my legs, burying her face in my trousers. The expensive white coat she had been so worried about soiling was now soaking up the oil and grime of the garage floor, but she didn't care. She was kneeling at the altar of $60 million. "Daddy, I am so sorry," she sobbed, loud theatrical sobs. "It wasn't me. I swear it wasn't me. I told Darnell. I told him we should take you in. I begged him. I said, 'Darnell, your father is out in the cold. We have to help him.' But he wouldn't listen." She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks. "He is so cruel, Dad," she said, pointing a shaking finger at her husband. "He threatened me. He said if I let you in, he would cut off my credit cards. I was scared. I wanted to help you. I love you so much. You know that, right? I have always loved you." I looked down at her. I looked at the woman who had called the police on me just 2 days ago. I looked at the woman who had thrown money in the mud rather than hand it to me. Darnell looked at her in shock. "Tiffany, what are you doing?" he shouted. "You are lying. You were the one who said he smelled like a wet dog. You were the one who called the cops." "He made me do it," Tiffany screamed back, still clinging to my leg. "He controls everything. I am a victim here too, Dad. Please, don't punish me for his mistakes. We can fix this. I will take care of you. I will personally set up the guest room, the one with the view of the lake. I will cook for you every day. Just please, forgive us." She tried to squeeze my leg tighter. She tried to rest her cheek against my knee. The sensation of her touch made my skin crawl. It felt like a snake coiling around my leg. I didn't speak. I reacted. I pulled my leg back hard. I didn't kick her, but the motion was violent enough to break her grip. She fell forward onto her hands, catching herself on the greasy floor. "Get off me!" I roared. The sound of my voice made her flinch. She looked up, terrified. "Do not touch me!" I snarled, leaning down so my face was inches from hers. "Do not you dare touch me with those hands!" I pointed at her right hand, the one resting on the concrete. "That hand," I said, my voice dripping with venom, "that is the hand that threw a $100 bill into a puddle of slush because you didn't want my poverty to touch your skin. That is the hand that dialed 911 and reported a false crime because you were ashamed of me in front of your country club friends." I stood up straight, towering over her. "You aren't sorry, Tiffany," I said, cold as ice. "You are just expensive. You have a price tag on your love, and unfortunately for you, I am not buying." Tiffany scrambled backward on the floor crab, walking away from me. She looked at her hands, which were now black with grease. She looked at Darnell. She looked at the exit. But she didn't leave. The gravity of the money was still holding her there. Marcus stepped forward then. He had recovered some of his composure. He was a politician, after all. He knew how to spin a disaster. He straightened his tie. He put on his serious face, the face he used when he was explaining away a scandal. "Dad, listen to me," Marcus said, holding up his hands in a calming gesture. "Let's all take a breath. Emotions are high. I understand that. But you have to see this from our perspective." He took a step closer, ignoring Jamal, who was glaring at him from the corner. "We didn't know about the sale," Marcus said, his voice smooth. "We honestly thought you were losing your mind. The bankruptcy, the wandering the streets. It looked like dementia, Dad. Everything we did, the guardianship, the facility, we did it because we wanted to protect you." He tried to smile. It was a weak, faltering smile. "We were trying to save you from yourself," Marcus continued. "If you had really been broke, wouldn't you want your sons to step in and take control? Wouldn't you want us to make the hard decisions? We were just doing what we thought was best for the family. We were trying to be responsible." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had ordered security to drag me into an alleyway. I looked at the man who had stood on a stage and lied to the entire city about where I was. "You wanted to protect me," I repeated slowly. "Yes," Marcus said, nodding eagerly. "Exactly. We were worried about you." I looked at Sterling. Sterling looked back at me and raised a single eyebrow. Then I looked back at Marcus, and I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a laugh that scraped against the back of my throat. It was a loud, booming laugh that echoed off the metal walls of the garage. I laughed until my chest hurt. I laughed until tears came to my eyes. "Protect me," I wheezed, wiping a tear away. "Oh, Marcus, you really are a politician. You can look a man in the eye and rewrite history while it is still happening." I stopped laughing abruptly. The smile vanished from my face like a light being switched off. "You weren't protecting me," I said, my voice dropping to a growl. "You were disposing of me. You were flushing me down the toilet because I was clogging up your lifestyle." I walked over to the table and picked up the guardianship papers again. "Involuntary commitment," I read aloud. "State facility. Indigent ward." I threw the papers at his chest. "Is that how you protect family, Marcus? By locking them up with strangers and forgetting the key? By telling the press I am in Switzerland while you sign papers to put me in a warehouse?" I turned to Darnell. "And you? You wanted to protect me by leaving me in a blizzard. You wanted to protect me by buying the mortgage of the only person who actually helped me so you could bulldoze his home." I shook my head. "Stop lying," I said. "Just stop. For once in your miserable lives, be men. Admit it. You didn't care if I lived or died. You only cared about the money, and now that you see the money is here, you suddenly care again. I walked back to Jamal. I put my hand on his shoulder. I felt him trembling, not with fear, but with adrenaline. He was watching his father destroy giants, and he was standing tall in the wreckage. But here is the irony, I said, looking at the three of them huddled together in their expensive coats. You wanted to know who was worthy, I said. You wanted to know who deserved the Payne legacy. I pointed to the bank statement still sitting on the table. That money doesn't belong to me anymore, I said. Darnell's head snapped up. What? I signed it over, I said. This morning, before I came here, I transferred the entire $60 million into a trust. Tiffany gasped. A trust? Yes, I said, smiling. A trust. And guess who the sole beneficiary is? I didn't have to say it. They looked at Jamal, the mechanic in the greasy coveralls, the brother they had mocked, the brother they had tried to crush. Darnell's knees gave out. He actually grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling. Marcus looked like he had been punched in the gut. Tiffany let out a small whimper of despair. It is gone, boys, I said. It is all gone. The house in Florida, the stocks, the cash. It all belongs to Jamal now. And knowing my son, knowing the man he is, I looked at Jamal and smiled warmly. I have a feeling he is going to be a lot more generous than you ever were, but that will be up to him, because, as of right now, I am just a retired old man living in my son's guest house. And you, I pointed at the door, you are trespassing. The silence that followed was total. It was the silence of 3 lives shattering into 1,000,000 pieces, and it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. You might think that seeing the look on their faces when they realized the $60 million was gone would be enough for me. You might think that watching Darnell clutch his chest and watching Marcus age 10 years and 10 seconds was the end of my revenge. But you would be wrong. Taking their inheritance was just business. That was just numbers on a page. But what I was about to do next was personal. This was for the father who had changed their diapers. This was for the man who had sat in the bleachers at every Little League game. I had stripped them of their future, but now I had to hold a mirror up to their past. I signaled to Sterling again. He reached back into the platinum briefcase. This time he didn't pull out a check or a deed. He pulled out a small, black, digital voice recorder. It was a cheap device, the kind you buy at an office supply store for $30. It looked out of place next to the gold pen and the leather documents. It looked like a toy. But in the world of high-stakes negotiation, information is more valuable than gold. And I had been gathering information from the moment Darnell closed that door in my face. Do you know where I kept this? I asked, picking up the recorder. I held it up so the light caught the scratched plastic casing. I kept it in a shoebox. An old dusty shoebox hidden under the workbench right over there. It was my insurance policy. Because even when I was pretending to be a senile old man, I was still a CEO. And a CEO never walks into a meeting without documenting the minutes. Darnell stared at the device. His eyes were wide with a new kind of fear. He remembered the conversations. He remembered the things he had said when he thought I couldn't hear or didn't understand. What is on that tape? Darnell whispered. His voice was barely audible. The truth, I answered. I pressed the play button. The sound quality was crisp. The silence in the garage amplified every scratch and pop of the recording. First came the sound of a heavy door slamming, then the sound of wind, then Darnell's voice clear as a bell. He smells like a wet dog, Tiffany. I can't have him here. Imagine if the neighbors saw him. We have the property values to think about. Then came Tiffany's voice, shrill and cruel. Just put him in a motel for 2 nights. Then we will stop paying. He will figure it out, or he will freeze. Either way, he isn't our problem anymore. Darnell's face went from pale to a sickly shade of green. He looked at Tiffany. She was staring at the floor, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. I let the recording run. There was a pause, then the sound of clinking glasses, background noise, jazz music. It was the recording from the night of the gala. Marcus's voice cut through the air. It was his private voice, the one he didn't use on television. The old man is a liability. He is senile. He is wandering around downtown looking like a beggar. If the press finds out he is my father before the election, I am dead in the water. Then another voice on the recording. The campaign manager probably. So what do we do, Marcus? Marcus's reply was immediate and chilling. We lock him up, we get him declared incompetent, we stash him in a state facility until November. Once the election is over, who cares? If he dies in there, it might even get me the sympathy vote. The grieving son. It plays well with the suburban demographic. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was different than before. It wasn't the silence of shock, it was the silence of judgment. I looked at Marcus. He was trembling so hard his teeth were actually chattering. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at Sterling. He was looking at the bodyguards. He realized that this wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was evidence. That was taken out of context, Marcus stammered. His voice was high and hysterical. Dad, you can't use that. That is illegal. You can't record people without their consent in Illinois. It is inadmissible. I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. In a court of law, maybe, I said. But I am not taking you to court, Marcus. I am taking you to the court of public opinion. I nodded to Sterling. Mr. Sterling has already sent a copy of this audio file to the Chicago Tribune, and to Channel 5 News, and to your opponent's campaign headquarters. Marcus let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. He grabbed his hair, pulling at it as if he could rip the reality out of his head. No, he screamed. No, you didn't. You wouldn't. That destroys me. That is my career. That is my life. If people hear that I am finished, I will be a pariah. You were finished the moment you decided your father's life was worth less than a vote, I said calmly. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of them. I felt 10 feet tall. I felt the weight of every sacrifice I had ever made for them lifting off my shoulders. I had carried them for 40 years. I had carried their debts, their mistakes, their egos. I had carried them until my back broke. But tonight, I was putting the load down. You know, I said, my voice low and intimate. I spent last night wondering where I went wrong. I wondered if I worked too much. I wondered if I spoiled you too much. I blamed myself. I looked at Darnell. He was weeping openly now, silently, tears streaming down his face. But then I realized something. I didn't fail you. You failed yourselves. You had every advantage. You had the best schools, the best clothes, the best connections. But you lacked the one thing that money can't buy. You lacked a soul. I turned to look at Jamal. He was standing by the door watching us. He looked sad. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't happy to see his brothers destroyed. He was hurting for them. And that was the difference. That was why he was the heir. I turned back to Darnell and Marcus. I have a new contract for you, I said. I didn't have a paper contract. I just had my words. The contract is simple. From this moment forward, you are strangers to me. I don't know you. Dad, please. Darnell begged, reaching out a hand. Don't say that. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I will change, I swear. I stepped back out of his reach. I don't have a son named Darnell, I said, my voice flat. I don't have a son named Marcus. My only son is standing over there. His name is Jamal Payne, and he is the only one who carries my name with honor. Marcus looked up, his eyes red and wild. You are disowning us, he whispered. I am not disowning you, I corrected him. To disown someone, you have to claim them first. And I don't recognize you. You are just two men who broke into my garage. I turned to the bodyguards, the 4 men who had been standing like statues by the door. Gentlemen, I said. The head of security stepped forward. Yes, Mr. Payne. These people are trespassing on private property, I said, pointing at the group huddled by the table. They are not family. They are not guests. They are intruders. I looked at Darnell one last time. I wanted to remember this moment. I wanted to remember the look of total loss on his face so that if I ever felt weak in the future, I could remind myself why this was necessary. Remove them, I ordered. The bodyguards moved instantly. They didn't pull weapons, but their presence was weapon enough. 2 of them grabbed Darnell. He tried to pull away, but he was soft. He was a man of leisure. These were men of iron. They hauled him toward the door, his camel hair coat dragging on the oily floor. Get off me! Darnell shouted, kicking his legs. Dad, tell them to stop. This is assault. I turned my back on him. 2 other guards moved toward Marcus. He didn't fight. He went limp. The fight had gone out of him the moment he realized the press was going to hear that tape. He let them drag him out, his expensive suit bunching up around his shoulders, his eyes staring blankly at nothing. Tiffany didn't wait to be grabbed. She shrieked and ran for the door, tripping over her own feet in her haste to escape. I listened to the sounds of scuffling. I listened to the sounds of Darnell cursing and Marcus sobbing. I listened as they were dragged out into the cold night air. And then I heard the sound I had been waiting for. It was the sound of them landing on the pavement. It wasn't a hard fall, but it was a humiliating one. They were thrown out of the garage exactly the way Darnell had thrown me out of his house. No coat offered, no ride called, just dumped onto the street like trash. The bodyguard stepped back inside and pulled the garage door down. The metal rattled as it hit the concrete, sealing us inside. The silence returned. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was clean. It was the silence of a room that had been purged of a bad smell. I stood there for a moment staring at the closed door. I felt a twinge of pain in my chest. It is never easy to cut off a limb, even if that limb is gangrenous. But then I took a deep breath and the pain passed. I turned around. Jamal and Keisha were staring at me. They looked shell-shocked. "Is it over?" Keisha whispered. I looked at the recorder in my hand. I walked over to the trash can in the corner. I dropped the recorder into the bin. It made a hollow thud. "Yes," I said. "It is over." I walked over to Jamal. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old pocket watch I had carried for 50 years, the one Darnell had always asked for. "I think this belongs to you now," I said, placing it in Jamal's hand. Jamal looked down at the watch. He ran his thumb over the gold casing. "Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you didn't have to do that. They are still your sons." I shook my head. "No, Jamal. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. You are my family." I looked around the garage. It was still a mess. It was still cold, but it felt like a palace. "Now," I said, clapping my hands together. "Sterling tells me the Rolls-Royce has a heated massage function in the back seat, and I believe we have a reservation at the penthouse suite at the Four Seasons. Who is ready to get out of here?" Keisha laughed, a sound of pure relief. Jamal smiled, wiping his eyes. "I am ready, Pops," Jamal said. "I am definitely ready." We walked toward the car, leaving the garage behind us. We were leaving the pain behind us. Outside in the dark, Darnell and Marcus were probably still sitting on the curb, freezing in the Chicago winter. But I didn't look back. I didn't care. They had the cold to keep them company. I had something much warmer. I had the truth. The morning sun hits the glass facade of the Skyline Tower with a brilliance that usually blinds anyone looking up from the street. Darnell Payne loved that building. He loved taking the private elevator to the 42nd floor. He loved the way the city looked like a Monopoly board from his corner office. He thought he was the player moving the pieces, but he was about to find out he was just one of the little plastic houses waiting to be swept off the board. I was waiting for him. I had been there since 6 in the morning. I sat in his chair. It was an ergonomic masterpiece imported from Sweden, leather soft as butter. I spun it around so I was facing the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the ant-like cars crawling on the highway below. I wasn't wearing my garage clothes anymore. I was wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit tailored on Savile Row. My shoes were polished. My watch was a Patek Philippe. The homeless man was gone. The chairman had returned. I heard the heavy glass door hiss open. I heard the frantic clicking of heels. Not Tiffany's heels. These were the nervous, hurried steps of Darnell's personal assistant. Then I heard Darnell's voice. He sounded hungover. His voice was rough-edged with lack of sleep and the residual panic of the night before. "Cancel my meetings for the morning, Sarah," he barked. "And get me a coffee. Black. I need to call the bank. I need to figure out how to stop the old man." He was still scheming. Even after I had stripped him bare in the garage, he still thought he could outmaneuver me. He thought he could call his bankers and leverage his way out of the hole. He didn't know that I was the one holding the shovel. Sir Sarah stammered. Her voice was trembling. "You can't go in there." "Get out of my way," Sarah Darnell snapped. "I am not in the mood for incompetence today." I heard the door to the inner office swing open. Darnell marched in. He stopped dead. He saw the back of the high executive chair. He saw the smoke curling up from the cigar I had just lit. Cuban. Illegal. But who was going to arrest me? I owned the building. "Who is in my chair?" Darnell shouted. "Security! Sarah, get security up here now!" I swiveled around slowly. I didn't say a word. I just took a long drag from the cigar and let the smoke drift across the mahogany desk. Darnell froze. His briefcase dropped from his hand, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. His eyes bulged. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. "Dad," he whispered. "Chairman Payne." I corrected him, my voice dry and authoritative. What are you doing here?" Darnell asked, stepping back. "You can't be here. This is my office. I am calling the police. You are trespassing again." I laughed. I picked up a file from the desk. It wasn't just any file. It was the master loan agreement for Payne Real Estate Development, Darnell's company. Trespassing, I mused. That is an interesting word coming from a man who is technically standing on my carpet. "What are you talking about?" Darnell demanded, his face flushing red. "I own this company. I built this. You borrowed this," I said, slamming the file down. "You built nothing, Darnell. You borrowed money to buy land you couldn't afford. You borrowed money to build condos no one wanted to buy. And when the interest rates went up, you borrowed more money just to pay the interest on the first loans." I opened the file, pointing to the signatures. "You are leveraged at 400%, I said, cold, hard facts dropping like stones. "You are drowning Darnell. And do you know who threw you the lifeline?" Darnell stared at the papers. He recognized them. They were the toxic loans he had been trying to hide for months. "The bank was going to recall these loans on Monday," I explained. "They were going to seize your assets. But I made them a better offer. I bought the debt, all of it. Every single cent you owe to every single bank in Chicago now belongs to a holding company called Justice LLC. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. "Guess who is the CEO of Justice LLC?" Darnell grabbed the edge of the desk. He looked like he was going to vomit. You bought my debt," he choked out. "I bought you," I said. "I own this company. I own the furniture. I own the computer you use to look at yachts you can't afford, and I own the lease on that Range Rover you let your wife drive to throw money at me." Darnell sank into one of the guest chairs, the chairs reserved for people begging him for favors. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you do this?" "Because of what you said last night," I replied. "You said love doesn't pay the bills. You were right. Business pays the bills. And this is just business. You are a bad investment, Darnell. You are reckless. You are arrogant. And you are cruel." I picked up the phone on the desk. I pressed the button for security. "Send them in," I said. The doors opened immediately. 4 security guards walked in. They weren't the building security. They were my team. The same men who had thrown him out of the garage. Darnell looked at them in horror. "Dad, please," he begged. "Don't do this. Not here. Not in front of my staff." I stood up. I walked around the desk until I was standing over him. 2 weeks ago, I stood on your porch. I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I asked you for shelter. I asked you for family. You told me to wait by the curb for an Uber. You told me I wasn't welcome because I smelled like failure. I buttoned my jacket. You kicked me out of your house, Darnell. Now I am kicking you out of my company." "You can't fire me!" Darnell screamed, jumping up. "I am the founder. You are an employee," I said calmly, "and you are terminated for cause. Gross mismanagement of funds, negligence, and moral turpitude." I nodded to the guards. "Escort Mr. Payne to the elevator. He has 5 minutes to collect his personal effects. Anything digital stays. If he touches a computer, arrest him for corporate espionage." The guards moved in. They grabbed Darnell by the arms. This time he didn't fight. He was too broken. He let them lead him out of the office past the staring eyes of his employees. The secretaries were whispering. The junior executives were pretending to work but watching with terrified fascination. The king had fallen and the execution was public, but the show wasn't over. As they dragged Darnell toward the elevators, the elevator doors chimed. Tiffany stepped out. She looked perfect as always. Her hair was done, her makeup flawless. She was wearing a new dress, probably bought on credit an hour ago, to make herself feel better after the disaster at the garage. She didn't know about the hostile takeover. She thought she was coming to lunch to strategize on how to talk me into giving them some money back. She saw Darnell being held by the guards. She saw me standing in the doorway of the CEO office. "What is going on?" she screeched. "Get your hands off him. Do you know who we are?" I walked toward her. "We know exactly who you are, Tiffany," I said. "You are the wife of an unemployed man with negative net worth." Tiffany froze. She looked at Darnell. "Unemployed," she repeated. "He is fired," Tiffany, I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "And since he used your mansion as collateral for the business loans which I now own, you are also homeless. The foreclosure notice is being taped to your front door as we speak. You have until noon to get your things." Tiffany turned to Darnell. Her eyes were wide, but not with concern for him. With calculation. "Is it true?" she hissed. "Did he take the house?" Darnell nodded, sobbing. "He took everything, Tiff. Everything. We are ruined." Tiffany stared at him for a second. Just 1 second. I watched the gears turn in her head. I watched the love, if it ever existed, evaporate like mist in the sun. She looked at Darnell, not as a husband, but as a sinking ship. And Tiffany was not a woman who went down with the ship. She stepped back. She smoothed her dress. Her face went cold. "Well," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I guess this is it then." "What is it?" Darnell asked, confused. "I am not doing this, Darnell," she said. "I didn't sign up for poverty. I didn't marry you to live in a motel like your loser brother." She reached into her purse. She pulled out a large envelope. It wasn't divorce papers, she was too fast for that. It was a prenuptial agreement. "I consulted my lawyer this morning," she said, tossing the envelope at Darnell's chest. "Just in case. There is a clause. If your net worth drops below $1 million, the marriage is voidable." Tiffany Darnell gasped. "You can't be serious. We are family. Family is for people who can afford it," Tiffany said, echoing Darnell's own words from the night before. It was poetic justice so sharp it cut the air. She turned to me. She didn't beg this time. She knew it was useless. She just gave me a look of pure hatred. "You are a monster," she spat. "I am a businessman, Tiffany," I replied. "And I just helped you liquidate a bad asset. You should thank me." She turned on her heel and walked back into the elevator, hitting the lobby button repeatedly. She didn't look back at Darnell. She left him standing there, held up by guards, crying in the hallway while his staff watched. "Get him out of here," I ordered. I watched them take him down. I walked back into the office. I sat in the chair. I spun it around to face the window again. I watched as a small figure emerged from the building entrance 42 floors below. I saw Darnell walking toward the parking lot carrying a cardboard box. He looked tiny from up here. I saw him reach his car, the Range Rover. But as he reached for the door, a tow truck pulled up. A repo man jumped out. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw the body language. Darnell arguing. The repo man shaking his head, showing a clipboard. Darnell slumped against the hood. He watched as they hooked up his car. The car he defined himself by. He was left standing in the middle of the parking lot holding a box of desk toys. The wind whipped his coat around his legs. He looked cold. He looked lonely. He looked exactly like I had looked 2 weeks ago when he closed the door in my face. I pulled out my phone. I dialed Jamal. "Hey, Pops," Jamal answered. He sounded happy. "We are just measuring the new sign, pain and sun. It looks beautiful." "It sounds beautiful, son," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "Where are you, Dad?" Jamal asked. "I am at the office," I said. "Just cleaning up some old trash. I will be home for dinner. What are we having?" "Steak," Jamal laughed. "Big, thick ribeyes. Keisha is making her special potatoes." I smiled. A real smile. "I will be there," I said. I hung up. I took one last look at Darnell down in the parking lot. He was sitting on the curb now, his head in his hands. "Lesson learned, son," I whispered to the glass. Lesson learned. I turned off the lights and walked out of the office, leaving the door wide open. They say that a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. But in the digital age, the truth moves at the speed of light, and when it hits with the force of a nuclear bomb. I was sitting on the balcony of the penthouse suite at the Four Seasons drinking a cup of Earl Grey tea. The steam rose into the crisp morning air, mingling with the view of the Chicago skyline. It was a beautiful view. From up here, the city looked peaceful, organized. But down on the ground, specifically in the campaign headquarters of Marcus Payne, absolute chaos was breaking loose. I had the television on inside the suite. It was tuned to the local news channel, the same channel that had broadcast Marcus's shining speech about family values just 2 nights ago. But the chyron at the bottom of the screen wasn't talking about polling numbers anymore. It was flashing in bright, urgent red letters. Candidate caught on tape. The Payne tapes leaked. The anchor, a woman who had interviewed Marcus kindly just last week, looked grim. "We have received audio recordings from an anonymous source," she said, her voice serious. "The content is disturbing. We warn our viewers that the language used is offensive." Then she pressed play. And my voice, or rather Marcus's voice, filled the room. "We lock him up. We get him declared incompetent. We stash him in a state facility until November. Once the election is over, who cares? If he dies in there, it might even get me the sympathy vote. I took a sip of tea. Hearing it again didn't hurt as much as the first time. The first time it broke my heart. This time it just sounded like justice. The fallout was instantaneous. I watched it unfold on my tablet like a slow-motion train wreck. Social media was on fire. The hashtag Monster Marcus was trending #1 in the country. People were dissecting every word. They weren't just angry about the elder abuse. They were furious about the hypocrisy. Here was a man running on a platform of compassion caught planning to imprison his own father for political gain. Then came the phone calls. I didn't answer them, of course, but Sterling was monitoring the chatter. The police union pulled their endorsement at 9 a.m. The teachers union followed at 9:15. By 10 a.m., the big donors, the real estate moguls, and the tech giants who had poured millions into Marcus's war chest released a joint statement distancing themselves from the toxic candidate. They didn't just walk away. They ran. They burned the bridge and salted the earth behind them. I watched the live feed from outside Marcus's campaign office. He tried to come out. He tried to do damage control. He stepped onto the sidewalk wearing his best suit, looking pale and shaken. He opened his mouth probably to say that the tape was doctored or taken out of context, but the crowd didn't let him speak. Shame, shame, shame. The chant started low and grew into a roar. Someone threw a tomato. It splattered against his shoulder, staining his expensive jacket red. Then came the eggs. Then came the water bottles. Security had to drag him back inside. The golden boy of Chicago politics had been turned into a pariah in less than 3 hours. I turned the TV off. I didn't need to see anymore. I knew where he would go next. When a man loses the world, he always runs back to the one place he thinks he still owns. He arrived at the hotel at noon. He couldn't get up to the penthouse, of course. The elevators were keycard access only, and his name was on the blacklist. So he stood down on the street. He stood right in front of the revolving brass doors where the doormen were looking at him with thinly veiled contempt. They had seen the news. Everyone had seen the news. I walked to the balcony railing and looked down. 40 stories is a long way, but I could see him clearly. He looked small. He didn't look like a councilman. He looked like a lost child. He was pacing back and forth, frantically typing on his phone, probably trying to call me. My phone on the table buzzed. "Dad, please, pick up. It is a misunderstanding. I am being framed. I need you to make a statement. Tell them it was a joke. Tell them we were role-playing. Please, Dad, they are destroying me." I looked at the text. Role-playing. He was still lying. Even when the noose was around his neck, he was still trying to spin the narrative. He hadn't learned a thing. I buzzed Sterling on the intercom. "He is downstairs," Sir Sterling said. "He is causing a scene. He is demanding to see you. He says he won't leave until you grant him an audience." "Let him wait," I said. I let him wait for 4 hours. I let him wait while the wind picked up off the lake. I let him wait while the paparazzi surrounded him, snapping photos of his desperation. I let him wait until his perfectly gelled hair was a mess and his suit was wrinkled. I wanted him to feel what it was like to be on the outside looking in. I wanted him to feel the cold that he had so casually condemned me to. At 4 p.m., when the sun began to dip behind the skyscrapers, casting long shadows across the city, I finally made my move. I didn't go down. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a face-to-face confrontation. He didn't deserve my time. He deserved my judgment. I called Sterling into the room. I handed him a single manila envelope. It wasn't thick. It contained 1 sheet of paper. "Take this to him," I said. Sterling looked at the envelope. He knew what was inside. He allowed himself a small, rare smile. "Is there a message to go with it, sir?" "Yes," I said, looking out at the horizon. "Tell him that Augustus Payne doesn't negotiate with terrorists. And tell him that if he wants to rebuild his life, he has to start at the foundation, because the penthouse is closed." I watched from the balcony as Sterling walked out of the hotel entrance. He moved with grace and authority, parting the sea of reporters. He walked up to Marcus. Marcus lunged at him. I could see him grabbing Sterling's arm, pleading, begging. He was asking for me. He was asking for money. He was asking for a lifeline. Sterling simply removed Marcus's hand from his sleeve. He said a few words, short, sharp. Then he handed Marcus the envelope. Marcus tore it open. His hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped it. He pulled out the paper. From 40 floors up, I couldn't see the words on the page, but I knew them by heart. I had typed them myself. It was not a check. It was not a legal pardon. It was an employment application. Company Payne and Son Logistics. Position Sanitation Engineer Level 1. Duties cleaning. Garage floors, scrubbing toilets, sorting hazardous waste. Salary minimum wage. And at the bottom, I had written a handwritten note. You wanted to clean up the family, Marcus. Start here. Start at the bottom where the real work happens. If you can last 6 months without complaining, without stealing, and without lying, I will consider speaking to you again. Until then, you are not my son. You are an applicant, and you are late for your shift. I saw Marcus stare at the paper. I saw his knees buckle. He didn't just fall. He crumbled. It was as if his skeleton had been removed. He dropped to the pavement right there in front of the hotel. He wasn't crying anymore. He was past tears. He was in shock. The reality of his new life was crashing down on him. The politician was dead. The janitor was born. The reporters went wild. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks. This was the money shot. The fallen prince on his knees clutching a job application for a janitor position. It was the end of his career and the beginning of his penance. I turned away from the balcony. The wind was getting cold and I had a dinner reservation. Jamal and Keisha were coming over. We were going to celebrate the new signage at the garage. We were going to talk about the future. I walked back into the warm, golden light of the suite. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt like a gardener who had just pruned a rotten branch so the tree could survive. Marcus had a choice now. He could stay on the pavement and rot, or he could pick up a mop and learn what it means to work for a living. I hoped for his sake he picked up the mop. But honestly, looking at him down there broken and defeated, I wasn't holding my breath. Some men are built for the climb and some men are just afraid to fall. Marcus had never climbed a day in his life. He had been carried. Well, the ride was over. I poured myself another cup of tea. Good luck cleaning the toilet, son, I whispered to the empty room. You are going to need it. I sat down on the velvet sofa and closed my eyes, listening to the soft jazz playing in the background. It was a good day. Justice had been served. And it was served cold, just the way I like it. The elevator ride to the penthouse suite of the Four Seasons usually takes less than a minute, but tonight it felt like a transition between two different universes. We stood in the mirrored box in silence. I was watching Jamal and Keisha in the reflection. They were holding hands so tightly their knuckles were white. They were still wearing their clothes from the garage. Jamal's coveralls were stained with grease and dust. Keisha's maternity coat was frayed at the cuffs. They looked terrified. Most people would be ecstatic. Most people would be jumping up and down screaming about winning the lottery. But Jamal and Keisha were not most people. They were survivors. And survivors know that when something looks too good to be true, it usually is. They were waiting for the other shoe to drop. They were waiting for me to laugh and say it was all a joke, or for the police to wake them up from this dream. When the elevator doors opened directly into the foyer of the suite, Keisha gasped. The room was bathed in the warm glow of the city lights. There was a fire crackling in the marble fireplace. A spread of food, real food, not smashed cupcakes, was waiting on the dining table. I walked in and took off my coat, tossing it onto a chair. I wanted to signal that this was real. This was home now. Sit down, I said, gesturing to the massive velvet sofa. Please, relax. Jamal hesitated. He looked down at his dirty boots. He looked at the pristine cream-colored carpet. Dad, we can't, he whispered. We are filthy. We will ruin the furniture. I turned around. I looked at my son, the man who had slept on a floor to give me a bed, the man who had eaten white bread so I could have a sausage. Jamal, I said softly, I own the hotel. If you ruin the sofa, I will buy a new one. If you ruin the carpet, I will replace it tomorrow. You are more important than the furniture. Sit down. They sat gingerly on the edge of the cushions like they were ready to bolt at any second. I poured 3 glasses of sparkling cider. I handed one to Keisha and one to Jamal. To family, I said, raising my glass. To family, they whispered back. We drank. The silence stretched out again. It was a heavy, awkward silence. Finally, Jamal put his glass down. He looked at me with those honest brown eyes, the eyes that couldn't hide a lie if they tried. Dad, he said, we need to talk about the money. I nodded. I expected this. What about it, son? I can't take it, Jamal said. Keisha grabbed his hand, but she nodded in agreement. It is too much, Jamal continued. $60 million. I don't know what to do with that kind of money, Dad. I am a mechanic. I fix cars. I work with my hands. I don't know anything about stocks or bonds or board meetings. If you give me that money, I feel like I will lose myself. I don't want to become like Darnell. I don't want to become like Marcus. I looked at him and I felt a surge of pride so strong it almost knocked me over. This was the final confirmation. Darnell had looked at the money and seen power. Marcus had looked at the money and seen influence. Jamal looked at the money and saw a burden. He saw the danger of it. I walked over to the desk in the corner of the room. I opened the top drawer. I pulled out a small heavy box wrapped in blue velvet and a set of keys. Not ordinary keys. These were electronic smart keys attached to a heavy steel tag engraved with a logo. I walked back to the sofa and sat down across from them. "You are right, Jamal," I said. He blinked, surprised that I agreed. "You are absolutely right," I continued. "Giving you $60 million in cash would be a mistake. It would be reckless. It might ruin you. And I didn't work for 50 years to ruin my only decent son." Jamal let out a breath of relief. "So, I am not giving you the money," I said. Keisha looked confused. "But you said in the garage." "I said the money is in a trust," I corrected, "and you are the beneficiaries. But a trust has rules. And I have set up some very specific rules for this one." I placed the set of keys on the coffee table. They landed with a heavy clunk. Jamal looked at the keys. He saw the logo etched into the steel. It was a gear with a pair of wings. The logo of Payne Logistics. But under it there were new words engraved. Payne and Son Service Center. "What is this?" Jamal asked, reaching out to touch the keys but pulling back at the last second. "I bought a building yesterday," I said. "It is on the west side. It used to be a dealership for German luxury cars. It is 20,000 square feet. It has 10 hydraulic lifts. It has a heated floor in the bay so your back won't ache in the winter. It has a waiting room with leather chairs and an espresso machine for your customers." Jamal's mouth fell open. "Dad." I held up a hand to stop him. "This is not a gift, Jamal. This is not charity. I am not giving you a toy." I leaned forward, my voice turning serious. The voice of the CEO. "This is an investment. I am investing in the one mechanic in this city who I know is honest. I am investing in the man who refused to upsell a customer when a simple fix would do. I am investing in the man who treats a 20-year-old Honda with the same respect as a new Ferrari." I pointed at the keys. "You are going to run this center. You are going to hire a team. You are going to train them to work the way you work with integrity. You are going to manage the fleet maintenance for my entire company. That is a contract worth $5 million a year on its own." Jamal stared at the keys. His eyes were shining. He wasn't looking at a winning lottery ticket. He was looking at a job. A massive, terrifying, wonderful job. "You want me to work for it," he whispered. I shook my head. "No, son. I want you to lead it. You aren't an employee. You are a partner. That is why the sign says Payne and Son. I provide the capital. You provide the sweat and the soul. Do we have a deal?" Jamal picked up the keys. He gripped them tight in his fist. He looked at his hands, the grease still under his fingernails. He looked at me. "We have a deal, Pops," he said. His voice was strong. "I won't let you down. I will make it the best shop in Chicago." "I know you will," I said. I sat back. The business was done. But there was one more thing. The personal thing. The thing that mattered more than buildings or contracts. I picked up the blue velvet box. "You passed every test I threw at you, Jamal," I said. "But there was one moment that broke me. One moment where I almost stopped the whole charade because I couldn't bear to watch what you were doing." Jamal looked at the box. He knew what was inside. "I watched you walk into that pawn shop," I said, my voice growing thick. "I watched you take the symbol of your marriage, the promise you made to God and to each other, and lay it on a dirty glass counter. I watched you sell your love to buy me a night in a motel." I opened the box. Inside, nestled in the white satin, were the 2 rings, the simple gold band and the small diamond chip. They had been cleaned. They sparkled under the chandelier light, not because they were expensive, but because they were precious. I took the rings out. I handed the gold band to Keisha. "Put it on him," I said. Keisha's hands were shaking. She took the ring. She reached for Jamal's hand. She slid the ring back onto his finger over the pale mark where it belonged. It fit perfectly. I handed the diamond ring to Jamal. "And you," I said. Jamal took the ring. He held Keisha's hand. He looked into her eyes. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He slid the ring onto her finger. I looked at them. Two people sitting on $1 million sofa wearing rings that were worth $300. And in that moment, they were the richest people in the world. A pawnbroker told you these were worth melt value, I said, wiping a tear from my own eye. He was a fool. He looked at the gold and missed the glory. I stood up. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. Tough times reveal true value, I said to the reflection in the glass. You two. You are the only things in my life that didn't depreciate when the market crashed. Darnell and Marcus, they were volatile assets. They looked good on paper, but they had no substance. But you, I turned back to them. You are the gold standard. Jamal wasn't looking at the keys anymore. He wasn't looking at the room, he was looking at his hand and then at me. And then he started to cry. He didn't cry like a child. He cried like a man who had been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders for too long and had finally been told he could put it down. He cried because for his whole life he had felt like the disappointment, the mechanic in a family of executives, the failure, and now he knew. He wasn't the failure. He was the only success. He stood up. He walked over to me. He didn't shake my hand. He hugged me. It was a crushing hug, a hug that smelled of oil and sweat and pure, unadulterated love. "Thank you, Dad," he sobbed into my shoulder. "Thank you for seeing me." I held him tight. I patted his back the way I used to when he was a scared little boy. "I always saw you, son," I whispered. "I just needed to make sure you saw yourself." Keisha came over and joined us, wrapping her arms around both of us. We stood there in the middle of the penthouse, a tangle of tears and laughter and relief. "Okay," I said, pulling away and clearing my throat, trying to regain my composure. "Enough crying. We have work to do. Jamal, you have a grand opening to plan. Keisha, you have a baby to get ready for. And me?" I walked back to the table and picked up a menu. "I have a craving for a ribeye steak, medium rare. And I am paying." Jamal laughed, wiping his face with his sleeve. "You are paying?" he asked, grinning. "I thought you were broke." I winked at him. "I am broke, son. All my money is tied up in a trust for a very stubborn mechanic. But I think he might advance me a loan for dinner. What do you say, partner?" Jamal grabbed the keys to his new life. "Approved," he said. "Loan approved." As we sat down to dinner, I looked at my son, and I knew that the Payne legacy was safe, not because he was rich, but because he knew exactly what it cost to be poor, and he would never, ever forget the price of a wedding ring. They say that time is the only currency you can spend, but never earn back. I spent 40 years trading my time for money, building an empire of steel and logistics. I thought I was buying freedom, but I was really just buying a golden cage. It took losing everything, or at least pretending to lose everything, to realize that the most valuable hours of my life were not the ones spent in a boardroom. They are the ones I am spending right now, sitting on a teak bench in a garden that smells of blooming jasmine and wet earth, watching a 2-year-old boy discover the miracle of a butterfly. "Catch it, Grandpa!" The boy squeals, pointing a chubby finger at a monarch fluttering near the hydrangeas. I laugh. It is a sound that comes from deep in my belly, a sound that I had forgotten how to make until a year ago. "I am too slow for that one, little Gus," I say, leaning forward. "My knees do not ache today. The sun is warm on my face, and for the first time in a decade, my heartbeat is steady." Little Gus. That is what Jamal named him. Augustus Payne II. He has his father's eyes and his mother's smile, but he has my stubborn chin. He is running across the manicured lawn of the estate, not a care in the world. He does not know that he is the heir to a fortune. He does not know that the grass he is running on costs more to maintain than most people earn in a year. All he knows is that he is loved. It has been exactly 1 year since the night in the garage. 1 year since the purge. I lean back and close my eyes, letting the sounds of the suburbs wash over me. It is peaceful here. It is... But my mind still wanders to the ones who are not here. I do not miss them, but I do keep tabs on them. A good CEO always monitors his liabilities even after they have been written off the books. Sterling brings me the reports on the 1st of every month. He places a manila folder on my desk and waits while I read it. We do not celebrate their downfall, but we do acknowledge the justice of it. Darnell is in the city. He lives in a studio apartment in a neighborhood he used to make fun of. He drives a delivery truck for a courier service. I watched him once from the tinted window of my car. It was raining. A cold, miserable Chicago rain. Darnell was struggling with a heavy package running up the steps of a brownstone. He slipped. He dropped the box. I watched him get up. He didn't scream. He didn't blame an assistant. He wiped the mud off his knees, picked up the box, and finished the delivery. He looked tired. He looked 10 years older. But for the first time in his life, he looked like a man. He is learning the weight of $1. He is learning that sweat is not something to be ashamed of, but something to be proud of. He is earning his keep. Maybe in 10 years he will be ready to have a conversation. But not today. Today he needs the rain. And Marcus, my politician, the golden boy who wanted to lock his father away to secure a vote, he left Illinois 3 days after the tape leaked. He couldn't walk down the street without someone spitting on the sidewalk. He moved to Nebraska. Sterling tells me he is working as a night manager at a chain grocery store. He changed his name. He wears a name tag that says Mark. I picture him sometimes standing in the fluorescent light of an empty aisle stocking cans of soup, listening to the hum of the freezer units. It is a lonely life, a quiet life. It is exactly the kind of life he wanted to sentence me to. Solitary confinement. He wanted me to be invisible, so now he has become invisible. The universe has a sense of irony that is sharper than any blade I ever wielded in business. And then there is Tiffany. The report on Tiffany is always the shortest. She stayed in Chicago. She tried to play the victim. She went on talk shows crying about how she was manipulated by her husband and father-in-law. But the public has a long memory. The audio of her calling me a wet dog went viral. It became a meme. She still goes to the country clubs, but she has to pay for her own drinks now. She sits at the bar nursing a martini looking for a new sponsor. But the wealthy men she hunts know the story. They see her coming and they check their watches. They know she is a liability. She has become the very thing she despised. A woman who is judged not by her soul, but by her price tag. And her price has dropped to 0. I open my eyes. The butterfly has landed on little Gus's nose. He freezes his eyes, crossing as he tries to look at it. "Don't move," I whisper. "Be gentle." He stays still, holding his breath. It is a moment of pure magic. The back door of the villa opens. Jamal walks out. He is not wearing coveralls today. He is wearing a polo shirt and khakis, but his hands still have the faint shadow of oil in the cuticles. You can take the man out of the garage, but you cannot take the mechanic out of the man. And I wouldn't have it any other way. He is holding a tray with a pitcher of lemonade. Keisha is with him holding a platter of sandwiches. She looks radiant. Motherhood suits her. She has a glow that no diamond could ever replicate. "Lunch is ready. Pops," Jamal calls out, setting the tray on the patio table. Little Gus breaks the spell. He swats at the butterfly and runs toward his father, screaming, "Daddy, Daddy!" Jamal scoops him up, swinging him around. The sound of their laughter echoes off the stone walls of the house. I watch them. I watch the way Jamal looks at his son. There is no calculation in his eyes. There is no expectation of return on investment. There is only unconditional love. I have transferred full control of the logistics company to Jamal. I thought he would struggle with the transition. I thought the boardroom would eat him alive. I was wrong. It turns out that running a global company is a lot like fixing a car. You listen to the engine. You find the part that is making the noise. You replace it with something stronger. And you don't stop until it runs smooth. He runs the company with a wrench in one hand and a pen in the other. He knows the name of every driver. He knows the birthday of every warehouse worker. Productivity is up 20%. Not because he rules with fear, but because he leads with respect. He is the CEO I always wanted to be, but never quite mastered. I stand up, stretching my back. I walk over to the edge of the garden where the rose bushes are thick and heavy with blooms. This was Beatrice's favorite spot. She used to spend hours here pruning and planting, talking to the flowers as if they were her children. I reach out and touch a soft pink petal. It feels like velvet. I look up at the sky. It is a brilliant blue, a Chicago summer sky that stretches on forever. "Beatrice," I whisper, "I know you are watching. I know you saw the mess I made. I know you saw the pain. I am sorry it took me so long to fix it. I was stubborn. I thought I could buy loyalty. I thought I could engineer a family the way I engineered a supply chain. I paused, feeling a lump in my throat. But I did it, B. I finally cleaned the garden. I pulled out the weeds. It was hard work. The roots were deep. They were tangled around my heart. But they are gone now. And look what is growing in their place. I look back at the patio. Jamal is feeding little Gus a piece of watermelon. Keisha is pouring lemonade, laughing at something Jamal said. They are happy. Not rich happy, just happy. I kept my promise to you, I whisper to the wind. I found the one who cares. I found the one who would have loved us even if we were living in a box. A gentle breeze rustles the leaves of the oak tree. It sounds like a sigh of relief, a sigh of forgiveness. Dad, Keisha calls out, "Come and eat. The sandwiches are getting warm." "I am coming," I say, turning away from the roses. I walk across the grass. My steps are light. I am 74 years old. My bank account is full, but that is not why I am rich. I am rich because when I sit down at that table, I will not have to wonder if the people sitting with me are plotting my demise. I will not have to record the conversation. I will not have to test their loyalty. I sit down. Little Gus climbs onto my lap. He smells of grass and sunshine. He hands me a half-eaten piece of watermelon. "For you, Grandpa," he says. I take it. It is sloppy and sticky and absolutely perfect. "Thank you, Gus," I say, taking a bite. Jamal looks at me. He raises his glass. "To new beginnings, Pops," he says. I look at him. I look at the house that is finally a home. I look at the legacy that is finally secure. No son. I say, raising my glass. To the truth. Because the truth is the only thing that sets you free. We clink glasses. The sound is clear and pure. As I drink the cold lemonade, I realize that I have played many roles in my life. I have been a poor boy from the South Side. I have been a ruthless businessman. I have been a homeless beggar. But this role, the role of a grandfather sitting in the sun with the people who love him, is the only one that ever really fit. The weeds are gone. The harvest is here. And for the first time in my life, I am not hungry anymore. I am full. The sun continues to shine. The butterfly returns, landing on the rim of my glass. And in the silence of the garden, I find the peace that $60 million could never buy. The smell of hickory smoke is the best perfume in the world. It is better than the expensive cologne Darnell used to wear, and it is certainly better than the sterile smell of the boardroom. I sat at the picnic table in Jamal's backyard, watching the smoke rise from the grill. We were not at the Four Seasons anymore. We were at the new house I had bought for them. It was a modest place with a big yard and strong bones, just like the family that lived inside it. Jamal was flipping ribs, his face flushed from the heat. He was laughing at something Keisha said. She was sitting nearby holding little Gus, who had finally fallen asleep after chasing butterflies all afternoon. The sun was beginning to set, painting the Chicago sky in shades of purple and gold. It was the kind of evening that makes you want to freeze time. But I had one last piece of business to conduct. One last stone to set in the foundation of this new life. I tapped my glass with a fork. The sound cut through the laughter. "Jamal, Keisha," I said. "Can I have a moment?" Jamal put down the tongs. He wiped his hands on his apron and walked over. The smile on his face was easy and relaxed. He wasn't afraid of me anymore. He wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. "What is up, Pops?" he asked, sitting down opposite me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded document. It was the final draft of my last will and testament. I had spent the last month agonizing over it with Sterling. I had looked at the numbers. I had looked at the history of families like ours. Families who made it big and then lost it all in one generation because the children forgot how to work. I looked at the document, and then I looked at my son. "We need to talk about the $60 million, I said. Jamal's expression didn't change. He didn't look greedy. He didn't look anxious. He just nodded. "Okay, Dad. What about it?" "I am not leaving it to you," I said. I said it flatly. I watched Keisha. She didn't gasp. She didn't frown. She just adjusted the blanket around the baby. I continued, my voice steady. "I have seen what money does to people who didn't earn it. I saw it with Darnell. I saw it with Marcus. They thought the money was a right, not a tool. It made them soft. It made them cruel. And I will not let that happen to you, and I certainly will not let it happen to little Gus." I placed the document on the table. "This is a trust deed," I explained. When I die, the $60 million in liquid assets will be transferred immediately to the Payne Foundation. It will be used to build trade schools in the South Side. It will provide scholarships for mechanics, plumbers, electricians, kids who want to work with their hands but can't afford the training. I paused, watching them closely. You will not receive a lump sum of cash. You will not receive a check that allows you to stop working. You will never be able to buy a yacht just because you feel like it. Jamal looked at the paper. Then he looked at me. A slow smile spread across his face. That sounds perfect, Pops, he said. I blinked. I had expected some pushback. Even a saint might hesitate at losing $60 million. You are okay with that? I asked. I am more than okay with it, Jamal said, leaning forward. Dad, if you gave me that money, I would worry every day. I would worry that people only liked me for my bank account. I would worry that Gus would grow up spoiled. I don't want to be a billionaire. I just want to be a father and a husband. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. However, I added, there is a second clause. I pointed to the bottom of the page. You don't get the cash, but you get the company. You get Payne and Son. You own the buildings, the trucks, the contracts, but you only get the profit that you generate. If you work hard, you will be wealthy. If you are lazy, you will be broke. The potential is unlimited, but the guarantee is zero. Jamal laughed. He reached out and took my hand. That is the only way I know how to live. Dad, he said, I don't want a handout. I want a head start. And you have given me more than that. You gave me a purpose. Keisha reached over and squeezed my hand too. We don't need the millions, Dad, she said softly. We have the business. We have this house. And we have you. That is enough. I looked at them. I looked at the peace in their eyes. And I realized that I had finally broken the curse. The curse of entitlement that had destroyed my other sons stopped here. It stopped at this picnic table. I signed the document right there next to the plate of ribs. Done, I said, capping the pen. The sun finally dipped below the horizon. The fireflies started to come out, blinking in the twilight. You know, I said, leaning back, Darnell called me yesterday. Jamal looked up surprised. He did. What did he want? He wanted to borrow $500, I said. His truck broke down. He needed a new alternator so he could get to work. And what did you say, Jamal asked? I said no, I replied. Jamal looked worried. Dad, he is trying. I know, I said. That is why I said no. I told him to bring the truck to Payne and Son. I told him that he could fix it himself in one of the bays. I told him I would stand next to him and hand him the wrenches, but I wouldn't do it for him and I wouldn't pay for it. And Jamal asked. He came, I said, smiling. He spent 4 hours under the hood. He got grease on his face. He busted a knuckle, but he fixed it. And when he turned that key and the engine started, I saw him smile. A real smile. The first real smile I have seen on his face in 20 years. Jamal shook his head, amazed. You are a tough old bird, Pops. I have to be, I said, looking at little Gus sleeping in Keisha's arms, because soft grandfathers make weak grandsons. And I am raising lions. We finished the meal under the stars. The air was cool, but I was warm. I had given away my fortune, but I felt richer than I ever had when the account balance was full. I had secured the future not with money, but with values. As I looked around the table, I knew that my life finally made sense. The betrayal, the pain, the cold nights in the garage, it was all necessary. It was the fire that burned away the chaff to reveal the gold. I am Augustus Payne. I am a father. I am a survivor. And I am finally home. Many believe that a parent's legacy is defined by the bank account they leave behind. But my journey taught me that true wealth isn't measured in millions, but in the hands that hold you when you have nothing to offer. I tested my sons not to deceive them, but to see their souls. To the greedy, family is a transaction. To the faithful, it is a sanctuary. Remember, honor your parents not for what they can give you, but for who they are. Because when the storm comes, money can buy a house, but only love can build a home. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share more stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to make a tough choice to protect your family? I read every single comment. Until next time, remember to keep your circle small and your heart open. Goodbye for now.